Okay, at 7 o'clock, I will open tonight's meeting and ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to remind everybody, in accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. Do I have any public comment from the board this evening?
I just had one public comment, and I was sorry that I missed the walkability study. I unfortunately had a funeral at exactly the same time. But tonight, from a friend's house, I walked to Conrad's, and it wasn't walkable. And so looking at businesses and connectivity, I really hope we don't just continue the discussion, but actually make the progress, because I stood for like 20 minutes, to like cross the street to a restaurant that was like inaccessible from a house on Mass Ave.
We were talking about extending down at Conrad's during that discussion.
So I look forward to that. That's all I wanted to say for now. Thank you.
Excellent. Anybody else?
I just wanted to say that high school graduation was lovely. The speakers were so articulate and wise beyond their years. It was a wonderful ceremony. And then on Sunday, the memorial service at Public Safety was a wonderful opportunity to honor our public safety angels who work so diligently to protect us all.
I will echo two of those. Actually, I was at all of the three events this weekend, as was Mrs. Luck. And first of all, congratulations to all the graduates of Lunenburg High School class of 2019. It was a wonderful ceremony, great speeches, and I will echo Superintendent Dr. Burnham's comments to everyone at that in attendance to be the turtle. So if you don't know what that means, I encourage you to go to YouTube and watch the ceremony. It was a good speech by her. Also on Saturday, was the walkability study, as Mrs. Adams just said. I want to thank the 24 people who came. It was so large, we actually had to split it into two groups, and we walked around. There'll be more of this in the town manager's report, but we did have two separate tours go around town center to talk about sidewalks, parking, crosswalks, sidewalk conditions, lack of sidewalks, what should be connected and not. So that's all being collated. I believe the report is supposed to come out in October. There's a lot of studying of other traffic data and crash data and other things going on. We're trying to orchestrate one for the Whalen district as well. There was a map showing the area of study, so they definitely are going to study it, but we want to have a citizens walk there as well. And we're going to try to have another town center citizens walk too, if we can do it. This one will be hosted by us because we already know the route and we know what they did, so we'll just kind of using somebody from town government or a town employee to lead that walk. So we'll try to have one of those, and we'll make them available the dates when they are when they're finalized. And lastly, the police and fire memorial that's annually done. That was Sunday. It's always touching to hear all the names of people who have served in the town all those years. And again, it was well attended too. So thank you everybody who put it on and who was memorialized there and who attended. Any public comment from the public? I'm guessing there's going to be some. Steve, after. Good evening.
My allergies, so I just brought water in case they act up. Good evening, how are you? Joanna Bellata, 362 Sunset Lane. I'm here as a resident and also as the president of the Lake Shirley Improvement Corporation. Okay. Lake Shirley is a 360-acre parcel of water, which I believe is the biggest parcel of land the town of Lunenburg owns. Last I was on planning board, that was the biggest parcel under the town of Lunenburg. In 2006, the LSIC worked with the town of Lunenburg, Board of Selectmen, the Lunenburg Shirley Conservation Commissions to implement a lake management plan due to invasive aquatic plants, algae, and a winter drawdown program. Knowing of the town could not financially support these programs that are needed for the Lake Association went to approximately 240 waterfront tax-paying residents, and it was voted to raise the volunteer dues at the time from $50 to $300 per single home, $450 for multiple, and $600 for business. We have two businesses. Keating's donates every year because they abut some of our lake, Shady Point, and then we do send a bill to the town of Lunenburg because they own several parcels. The LSIC goes door to door. We mail out bills every January to all the residents. We fundraise, word of mouth. We do all kinds of programs to try to raise money for this. Because again, we don't own the body of water, the town does. We just try to take care of that watershed so it's usable for recreational use. I'm very proud to say that going into our 13-year running, our lake management program, we started 2006 to 2018, using the two top consultants in the industry, Solitude and Dr. Ken Wagner. The LSIC has raised approximately $500,000, and we have put that $500,000 back into the body of water with not one complaint from DEP, EAP, Fish and Wildlife, or any resident in those 13 years. I am here this evening seeking your help. I need some help and support pertaining to Lake Shirley and the order of conditions under the LSIC Lake Management Plan implemented by the Lunenburg Conservation. From 2006 to 2015, the LSIC Lake Management Plan went off without a hitch. Usually, the LSIC and Conservation Commission met 3 times a year, and everything ran very smoothly unless we were introducing a new type of chemical that we would be using. We would have to gain approval of that, but if it was the same that we had discussed at our end-year report, we did not need to. In June of 2015, the commission members changed the dynamic of the commission. They had some new members put on, and the LSIC, that relationship changed. In 2015, the commission recommended we apply for a new notice of intent, which we did, and that was for 3 years, so it came up September 7th of 2018. So in August of 2018, Mr. Morrow, the Lunenburg Conservation Agent, advised that the current orders were due to expire and that we would need to send a written request for an extension of the existing order of conditions. In 2000, so they actually expired in October 2018. The LSIC requested a 3-year extension in writing on September 7th to April 15th. That's what we asked for, a 3-year. They gave us till April 15th of 2019. They wanted to review the order conditions. On March 6th, 6 months later, the LSIC was advised by the Lunenburg Conservation that we would need to request a second extension and that the LSSC was still discussing the existing order of conditions. So on March 7th, we, as they requested, applied for the extension again, which they approved to June 6th of 2019, which is Thursday, I think, Thursday. Through a discussion with DEP and the LSIC consultant, Solitude, we had learned that order of conditions under the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act can be extended or denied by the Conservation Commission. The Commission cannot amend orders. The LSIC, as the applicant, can request to amend an order, because I'm the applicant, so I can request them to, for example, we did it with, I can never say my yeses, I apologize, shellfish survey. So that was in our orders. When we went to get them amended, we asked for an amendment to remove that, and they were happy to do that. So, but they cannot amend. They can either apply or deny. If they deny, we can apply for a notice of intent. They would give us now their conditions, and as an applicant, we can accept them or we can appeal them with the DEP. There is no appeal process on amended order conditions, hence why they can't amend them, because we don't have an opportunity to appeal that. So me learning that, went back to the Conservation Commission on April 3rd and shared with them what I had learned. I did not know that we could do that. So through the conversation with them, I had asked, because now we were in a predicament of we're in April. They've had the order for 9 months that we're waiting for either the yes or the no on the extension. They now have provided from a 2-page to an 8-page document with amendments in it that they're not allowed to do. And I'm in my summer season, so for me to now apply for a notice of intent, it would not get done, approved, and me have time, the LSIC have time to appeal that for our summer season. There just wouldn't be enough time to do that. So what I asked at the April 4th conservation meeting, because I still don't even have the final draft of the amendments, is if they could please let us keep our existing order of conditions till September 30th of this year. We would happily file a new notice of intent. They can put whatever they want for requirements under that notice of intent, and if we don't like it, we'll then appeal it, or those will be our new order of conditions. They advised they would take that under advisement, so then we had to go back to the next meeting, April 17th, to get that response. So on April 17th, they now had the finished document. Mr. Luck presented the edits he had made. They presented those edits. They voted on those new amendments. Again, I asked them not to, please extend what we're doing. They said no. They approved the amended order, and then they were voting now to extend the amended orders till September 30th with I rescind, because I don't want the amended order of conditions. They're not allowed to do that. So they took that away, and so now there is no, they're actually thinking of getting, I guess, a new LSIC. They're going to ask you if you could appoint a new LSIC to run the program, I guess. So that's where they're kind of at now. So on May 2nd, we received an email from Commissioner Luck. And in that email, he sent it to residents and directors with his thoughts on the situation between the LSIC and the commission. And the quote from Mr., and I brought the email for all of you to have. Mr. Luck's last paragraph reads, "To the best of my knowledge, these are the most relevant and timely facts and concerns that the LSIC management team should be aware of and consider before the current extension request period expires on May 6th. Perhaps this has already been discussed at your recent directors' meeting, and a new permit extension request has already been filed. If not, there is still time to hold that door open for future consideration regarding an extension versus processing a new NOI. Sincerely, Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane." So then we say, oh, maybe they've reconsidered because we weren't now going to run the program. So we sent another written request as instructed to get on the agenda to discuss the orders of conditions. So that was the May 29th meeting that did not go well at all for any party. And I feel really bad about that because I think everybody is frustrated. Because I know for myself, and I say it quite, mentally you can only talk about something so much, and then you get very frustrated. So for the Conservation Commission, these poor gentlemen, as Mrs. Luck just said last week, sit there till 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, hearing about the LSIC and these order of conditions. So through a group themselves, they have to listen to this, and they've had to listen to it for the last 8 months. We're frustrated because we pay 5% more in taxes because we're waterfront property. We just sold 3 houses for over $1 million, so we have tax revenues coming in, but we're collecting money on top of our taxes to maintain your biggest property in town. And instead of people working with us collaboratively, they just keep putting more items in the bucket for us to do. And a couple of things, they're going to say, well, they're just minor. They're simple. We're tidying up things. Well, if they're that minor, just give us our original back. Let us file for a new NOI, and then you could put those in there. Secondly, I, as an LSIC board, it's not mandated. So there's 240 houses, about 100 pay, anywhere between 100 and 120. So we argue amongst ourselves, because the other 100 that don't pay, the people that pay are angry at them, and they want them to pay. There's people angry because they feel their taxes should pay. So we fight among them to try to explain that that's not going to happen. If we want the body of water, we all have got to be good stewards. We all got to participate. We all got to care for it because nobody else is going to, and we want for generations that lake to bloom. And then we go to meetings to try to run these programs, and then they argue with us. And everything that they ask us to do is either more time or more financial burden. And we don't have either of those. Hickory Hills is a phenomenal group. I own property on there as well. They're phenomenal. They have a great, because they're invested in that body of water. They own it, it's theirs, they control it. I don't have that big work group. There's probably about 6 real people that are in doing billing, doing all the stuff we do all year long. So we don't have a big pool to pull from. So to keep adding more things to care for or cover is more time, people that we don't have. And then, again, anything fiduciary is more money that we don't have. And any given year, I could have 20 people get mad, and I just lost 20 members at $300 a whack. So I don't even know year to year what we're going to be able to afford to pay, because it's all based on who wants to send a check in this year. So to mandate that I have to do specific things that cost X amount of dollars isn't always feasible, because then if I don't have that financial means, I'm out of compliance, and then our orders are in, hindrance. And we don't want that either. So and it's very clear that the DEP has sent 2 emails, and I have those. Anything I refer to, I brought, so I can back that up. I have 2 emails from the DEP in writing stating they cannot amend orders. They can approve them or deny them. They cannot amend them. Local bylaw is something different that they have nothing to do with. And if we do an NOI and we go to state and we appeal it at the state level, we then follow under the state guideline, and the local doesn't pertain to us, is what they explained.
Before you continue, so I am aware of what happened. The board is aware
okay.
of what happened. I don't want to get into, pardon the pun,
Sure.
I don't want to get into the weeds of what's going on.
Yep.
Because I think we have a session, an executive session, to be briefed further.
Okay.
I think this will be a topic. I think it's going to be hard to believe it's not going to be a further topic where we'll get all the pertinent members and everybody involved in a more deep session instead of a public comment. So it'll be a
Perfect.
agenda item or something. But I don't want to cut you off,
Sure.
but I don't want you to play out your whole case, because, again, we're just hearing about it this week for something that obviously the whole fire point, or flashpoint, was the last meeting, but it's been going on for months, obviously, and we want to hear from
About 3 years.
both sides. We want to hear what's going on so we can really be fully apprised. So,
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Because, and I won't read. I was driving here and, had an epiphany. So you're going into you're going to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation. Now, would the Lux be able to go into that executive session, because they were butters, they own 3 pieces of property, which is all part of a financial. So how would executive session work with Mr. Luck on the Conservation Commission? That's really someone that we might be seeking legal action on, as well as Mrs. Luck, as a selectman going on, who again owns 3 properties, doesn't support the program, is against it. And this is all part of the pending litigation.
sure.
So are they going to recuse themselves from executive session?
Well, having not heard this at all until yesterday, I don't know the answer to that. Recusal is something that they may need to file and get a recommendation from the state, and we may, and that we'll probably ask for that. I don't know if Mr. Luck has already done that in his ability to deliberate as a Conservation Commission member. So again, we're going to be gathering all the facts. I don't know the answer to that question about what they assume, what they will do or might do, because I haven't asked them.
And Mr. Chair, if I may ask a question.
Sure.
Why is it an executive session that we're discussing it, and why wasn't it just on the agenda?
Because I believe it's potential litigation, because
Okay.
that's what was.
And then in terms of her question, since we are lucky enough to have town council here, could we or should we run it by him?
What?
Who should be in executive session during something involving litigation?
Well, we know.
Just
What-
so that we make sure we're proceeding cautiously.
Yeah, well, for the purpose of the
I'm just
executive
asking for his input, that's all.
now.
Or before we go into executive session. I just think it's great that
Well,
he's here.
the board is going into executive session, and we're going to ask another town body, the Conservation Commission was asked to be in there to present to us what the town's position is first.
Sure, we just had a resident ask a question about who should and shouldn't recuse themselves, and I think I would like the answer to that before I go into executive session. And oftentimes we run things by town council, and so I was just wondering if we could seek his input, because he's here.
Mr. Town Council, Mr. Costa, would you like to weigh in on the whole idea of recusal?
Would I like to, or you're asking?
Please, I will rephrase the question. Please weigh in on the idea of recusal.
I will do that, Mr. Chairman. So just for a point of clarity, because I've heard the term used by the previous speaker, pending litigation. So there is no pending litigation involving Lake Shirley or involving the LSIC. There is a imminent threat of litigation that was received by the board, and my understanding is that that's the basis for your agenda item later tonight in the executive session. That is a proper basis for going into executive session to discuss threatened and imminent litigation. On the issue of recusal, we get these questions often as town council. This member is conflicted out, that member is conflicted out, and the difficult answer for council is it's really up to that member. It's the member's obligation to comply with the Massachusetts ethics laws. If there is a violation or a perceived violation, then any party who perceives that violation has the ability to, number one, request that the appointing authority, if it's an appointed position, remove that individual from the board for conduct unbecoming the office or require recusal, or file a complaint with the State Ethics Commission, and there's a process that ensues with the State Ethics Commission. My understanding, and it's limited in this context with respect to Lake Shirley and the LSIC, is that at least with regard to the matter that's been pending before the Conservation Commission, Mr. Luck, who was previously referenced, has filed a disclosure quite some time ago with the board indicating that to the extent that matters come before that commission, that he is a landowner along Lake Shirley. So I believe that that disclosure has been filed. Again, that's not a basis for, in my opinion, not going into executive session. The executive session is an executive session of the board, potentially the Conservation Commission as well, to discuss threatened imminent litigation against the Conservation Commission and the board in those capacities. To the extent that any member is potentially conflicted out, again, that's a separate issue, and that's between the member and the State Ethics Commission or the appointing authority.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Because
Of whom?
I don't know.
through me
but,
to
through
him?
you?
Okay,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to go in a circle. Because I've watched the 2015 June 2nd video quite often in the last 2 days. And that was when Mr. Luck was appointed on to the Conservation Commission. And I believe that State Ethics weighed in, and the Board of Selectmen at that time signed a waiver for Mr. Luck to serve on that, be appointed to the Conservation Commission. So my understanding, I could be wrong, my understanding is that he's on the appointed board on a waiver that was signed by the Board of Selectmen saying he could be non-biased. So is that something that they would both have to sign again for this process?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Full disclosure, I've not seen the paperwork. I've seen a draft paperwork form of disclosure that was unsigned, that was provided by Mr. Luck at my request. I've not located or seen a signed disclosure, but it's my understanding that there was a signed disclosure. It's not a waiver, it's a disclosure form. It's required under the ethics law to be filed with the appointing authority, and the appointing authority has to go through the formal process of accepting that disclosure. That's the process that ensues. It typically is on a case-by-case basis, and my understanding that the purpose of this disclosure disclosure was with regard to issues involving Lake Shirley. Certainly Mr. Luck can sit on the Conservation Commission and address other issues throughout the community that have some sort of wetlands or other Conservation Commission jurisdiction. Simply because he's a member of or a resident of Lake Shirley doesn't preclude him from doing that. The issue becomes when applicants come before the commission or matters come before the commission that do implicate Lake Shirley, can he act in an impartial manner? Can he act in an unbiased manner? And again, the law allows him to say that he can and to file the disclosure with the appointing authority and for the appointing authority to accept or reject that disclosure. And my understanding is that that's what was done back in 2015, but I have not seen the signed document.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver.
Good evening.
Good evening.
First of all, I wanted to say, as a combat vet in Vietnam, that your speech at the board chair, speech at the Memorial Day ceremony was very nice. And also, as a ex-firefighter, an ex-EMT, an ex-police officer, I would say that Selectman Phyllis Luck, that was a very, very touching speech that you did, and very personal. And I just wanted to thank both of you for that. Okay, on to business now. I'm Steve Weaver, 288 Holman Street. I don't know if I said that. I wanted to caution the board when looking at appointed position. When someone needs to be replaced, it shouldn't come as a surprise to them. That's the importance of doing a good performance review, because then employees know how they are performing. Sometimes longevity is good because an employee has learned a lot of knowledge about their job through the years. You don't always know what you might be getting when you hire somebody who's applying from the outside. Some of the people may interview well because they interview often. Someone, be a professional interviewer. Some who have worked a long time and not missed any time may not interview well because they're not used to interviewing. That's all I had to say about that. Now, the Montechusett Lunenburg Walk. I saw a flyer at the Gulf gas station about it. I didn't know where it came from because it wasn't on any of the selectmen's minutes or agendas. I found out it came from Heather. I was not able to attend, but I had a suggestion that when looking for more parking and pedestrian traffic in the center of Lunenburg, a good solution would be to tear down the old primary school and make it a park and have extra parking there. This solves a lot of issues with that building, and it also solves parking in the future and a nice park in that location. I would like the opinion of Selectman Adams on that, and Selectman Luck and Selectman Jeffries on their opinion on putting a park over there. Yeah.
Respond now.
Yeah.
I think it goes over 2.5 years now where we've been talking about town center, and I always think of the land and the items in town center as what are the municipal opportunities before we were to ever convey them, and that's why 3 times conveyance has been turned down at town meeting. And I think that parcel being in the town center, essentially already as a parking lot, a defunct parking lot, now has been granted an easement to the Historical Society to be a parking lot. I think there's a lot of potential there to put in a a home base of parking where people can sort of come from there. But it's about 2.5 acres. So on the back end, I think it gives you the opportunity to take what is the dangerous gazebo triangle and relocate a park. And I think then you have a really great municipal outcome. And like I've said a number of times, we could work on goals like that to be ready to turn 300 in 2028.
I think that's fantastic.
So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah. Selectman Luck?
You know, I agree with Katie that we should not convey the land. I'm not sure that a park, I feel like it's kind of set back in, and I feel like parks should be more open, and so that bad things don't happen at night when no one's looking. So I would have to see a design that allowed it to be open.
Great, great, and I appreciate that. I know the old primary building has been over there for a number of years, and it's still standing. I mean, nobody's lit it up or anything, so I think it's, you know, and there's not a lot of vandalism done to it, but, so I think it is kind of a safe area. Selectman Jeffries?
Yeah, I think that we need to finalize a comprehensive plan of what we're going to do with all of our properties that are currently vacant. You know, I'm hesitant to come to a conclusion on the front end of things, and then there will be a process in which all I will be doing is reaffirming my conclusion. But given the location of the primary school, I can't imagine much uses for that area beyond a park, and beyond there being you know, parking area, you know, to support whatever else is around it.
Well, thank you so much for your input. Now, the last thing that I wanted to touch on is I wanted to, I think that the board should revoke the entertainment licenses for 300 Holman Street. The reason being that there's a cease and desist order in effect. The Zoning Board of Appeals don't meet again until June 12th, and I know that Gary Rhodes was going to enforce the cease and desist order on the photography event on June 8th. Mr. Massey, lawyer, informed my lawyer that he was canceling that photography event. So that entertainment license is gone anyway. I think that you should cancel these two events because they would be in violation of the cease and desist order. The zoning board appeal denies the appeals. Well, if the zoning board of appeal denies the appeal for the event, the events cannot be held. I know that the entertainment license are being appealed in Worcester Superior Court, but if they don't exist, then they don't have to be appealed. So I'm just asking if the board would reconsider that and think of that as far as revoking those licenses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Any other public comment?
John Tater, 135.
No, you have to come to the mic. You have to come to the microphone, please.
I don't think I really need it,
You do for the people at home. Clearly, I don't need it for here.
but pardon me, I've been away from Lunenburg government for 2 decades. But I recall, is it not true that every...
Start with your name and address, please.
John Tater, 135 Flynn Road.
Thank you.
Is it not true that every public board and committee is required to maintain minutes?
Yes.
Is there a time requirement for those minutes to be published and available to the citizens prior to that committee's next meeting?
Not prior to the meeting. There are elements of time allowed within the open meeting law, and then they can release draft minutes, but they don't have to be by the next meeting. It depends on the frequency of the board's meetings and other things, but not necessarily by the next meeting.
So it's a
Couldn't
gray
be by
area.
the next meeting because they have to be approved at the next meeting.
They don't have to be approved at the next meeting.
But I mean, you can't release them until they're approved, right?
Right. Well, you can
So-
release draft minutes.
Oh,
So they have the option to release draft minutes, but generally they like to see they like the board members or committee members to see them before they're even released in draft to make sure there's no really egregious errors.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh,
how that happened, but anyway. I'm gonna go a little off the cuff here. I want to say I'm so happy to see you here, just saying.
can you start with your name and address,
Jai
please?
Fields, 95 Sunset Lane, Lunenburg, Mass.
Okay.
I'm the legal representative for No Woco Pride, and I'm a resident of this town. And before I read Mr. Vivenzi's statement, I'd like to let you know about a personal issue that I've experienced in this town 25 years ago. I grew up in the town of Air, and I played basketball against this town. And I'll never forget that the varsity team called me and my teammate monkeys from the bleachers. It's sad to say that this town has not progressed from 1993 to 2019. And just to note, Mr. Vivenzi is unable to be here because his grandmother is in hospice. And the statement from Anthony is he would like to thank the Board of Selectmen for allowing No Woco Pride to serve the LGBTQIA community in Lunenburg. And second, he would like to say that they condemn hate in any form, and to think that in 2019, people feel the need to try to shut down Pride events by any means necessary because they are ignorant, uneducated, and simply bigoted and hateful of what they don't like or understand has no place in Lunenburg, North Worcester County, or the state of Massachusetts. Here are some shocking statistics about hate in LGBTQIA people. LGBT youth are 5 times as likely to have attempted suicide than heterosexual youth. Each episode of LGBT victimization, such as physical or verbal harassment or abuse, increases the likelihood of self-harming behavior by 2.5s on the average. In 2018, 26 trans people were murdered in the United States, one of which was Mr. Vivenzi's friend from North Adams, Massachusetts. To date, there have been 9 trans people murdered, and 88% of sexual abuse against children are committed by heterosexual males and females. And in conclusion, I would like to point out that using state, city, and town and government officials to enforce discrimination on anyone is against the law in this state. So from Anthony, he says, peace, love, and red lips, Anthony Vivenzi, Nikita LaFemme. He's the president of No Woco Pride. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chair, if I may
You may.
comment, and I just wanted to say to the previous speaker, I'm sorry if anything negative happens in the past in Lunenburg or present, and that I think Lunenburg's a good community, and I do think that anywhere negative things can happen, so I'm very sorry. When it comes to talking about special events at the Holman Street property, as far as when I discuss them, I just want to make sure that I make a statement I've made in the past, that it's never about what the event is. It's about the property and some of the ongoing needs and confusions with the abutters on the property. And so any thoughts I've directed, or I think in general that the board, when we talk about Holman Street, there's been so many events I think there was a dog sledding event, et cetera. And so it's whether or not the events can be zoned properly. And it, as far as any of my discussion goes, it has absolutely nothing to do with what the event is. And I just want to make sure, because it is on our agenda tonight, that I have absolutely no desire to shut down an event, and would actually welcome a group, if something goes wrong with the permitting, to look for another place in town to have it, so that the event doesn't go down with the circumstances of the property. And I think we'll all be very careful when we're dealing with the residential property and all the history there, that it's not about trying to stop a specific event. It's about a lot of history and data there, and would encourage us to try to find a way for these events to take place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I also, I know we're getting late on time, may I respond to the previous speaker as well?
Go ahead, Mr. Jeffries.
So, I really appreciate your comments. I went to school here in Lunenburg as well. I graduated in the year 2000, and from that time I joined the military, moved away, came back and am now sitting here as a member of the select board. It's no secret that Lunenburg's makeup is majority white. That's not a secret. However, I'd like to point out that despite that, I was elected to sit here.
That's why I said that.
And so I think, I think that I experienced racism while going through the schools here. My nephew graduated in 2009 and also experienced racism while going through the schools here. Last year, I ran a campaign. Ms. Adams, Selectman Adams was my opponent. And though we never had, any personal kind of conflict, there were absolutely racist things said to me, not by Ms. Adams at all,
Okay.
but by others.
Whoa. Let's be very, very clear. This is a very
Yep.
difficult conversation, and absolutely,
There were absolutely-
I am related to African Americans and have never gone near anything negative.
And I'm
so I
not
just want to be
accusing you of
very
that.
careful here.
There were absolutely racist things that were said to me then. I don't believe that our community is racist. I don't believe that when I wake up every day, I am just a man. I'm just a person. And I really look forward to the day when we as a society, when we will get to the point where I will stop being the first black selectman, or I will stop being a black something else. My skin color is how I was born. So the things that I've been able to accomplish in the course of my life are the things that make me proud. So I am married. I have a husband. I live in Lunenburg. I'm a God-fearing man. I love my Lord. And I am not by any means ashamed of who I am today, but I will say that we all, in our own development, we all have to come, we all have to progress, and I think that where we are as a community and where we are as a town is good. I think we have had issues in the past, and we are in this really long process to overcome them. People have the right to be racist. They have the right to hold whatever views they want, whether I agree with them or not. We do not have the right to act on those actions that are racist. So that is, I think, the area where, if it's in your heart to look at me and say, that's a black man, I don't like him, you have the right to feel that way. If you look at me and say, he has a husband, I can't support that, I understand that. There are many religious views that do not support that, and you absolutely have that right to hold that view. But when your actions begin to treat someone differently, then we have a problem. And that problem is really within oneself. Within oneself. So I appreciate the comments today. I also appreciate the direction that we are on as a town, and I'm thankful. I am thankful for the opportunity to sit here as your selectman.
Any other public comment from the public?
Are you done with Lake Shirley?
I think we've
Wanna
just
speak?
gotten started.
Go ahead.
A lot of this is going to be repetitive, but I need to say it, so bear with me.
I would ask I don't want to cut anybody off because I know
Okay.
the
I'll make it
emotion.
short.
Right. I just want to be time sensitive to our 7 o'clock appointment.
All right. Jackie Ramondelli, 599 Reservoir Road. I'd just like to comment on the meeting at the Conservation Commission last week with the Lake Shirley residents regarding their lake management program. I can't comment on exact events because I arrived a few minutes late, but in time to see the police arrive. However, in hearing from others about the events, I can totally understand. There is a lot of frustration from the residents, and rightfully so. I have lived on Lake Shirley most of my life. I am on the board of the LSIC and have been since the start of our lake management program in 2006. It has been a great program, even though a challenge due to our Conservation Commission's requirements. The LSIC has met in those 13 years of this program probably 10 or more times a year with the Conservation Commission. and had to jump through more hoops than probably any lake association in the whole of New England. The LSIC has hired very reputable people and companies, aquatic biologists, which I don't believe anyone on the Conservation Commission is, at great cost because of the reports, the data, and always something more that the commission continues to require of us. The LSIC is a volunteer board that works very hard to do everything possible to care for the lake in the best possible way. We have 13 years of proof of that. The town of Lunenburg has contributed zero monies to help the residents who live on the lake pay to maintain and care for this beautiful asset, which is owned by the town. So we've done the town a great service. It's the residents who are paid, the ones who live there, and isn't it sad that one of our Conservation Commission's very own does not contribute to caring for this lake? That would be Mr. Luck. But is a major source of frustration in the continued requirements placed upon us by that board. I understand the people on any commission are supposed to be non-biased, but that is not the case. Since the Board of Selectmen appoint people to the Conservation Commission, I would assume they can also remove appointed people if a serious conflict of interest or an unmistakable bias by one of the members. The boards in town are here to make sure things are done correctly for the environment, our community, the people, and according to state and town regulations to make things better and safe in our communities. Our boards need to work with the residents for this purpose, not against them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment from the public? Sir, give you one.
I'll be brief.
No, go ahead.
My name is Gary Spint. I live at 7 Ruth Street in Lunenburg. Been here for 3.5 years. I'm not a real long resident. I spend half of the year in California and half of the year here. We like the summers here, and that's why we spend the time here. We have family. I do want to convey to the board, I have become active in LSIC, and yesterday we had a wonderful event, absolutely spectacular community event where we had over 200 people in unison having a great time at a golf tournament that we held over at Devon's. I don't know if you heard about it or not, but you probably will hear about the goodwill and joy that all the residents got together and had a marvelous time at that activity. But I do have to caution you also that at that activity there was an underlying current, if you want to call that there, and there is a real feeling of the residents on the lake that this issue of the conflict of interest needs to be addressed by the town of Lunenburg. And it needs to be addressed because there is it just seems like we butt up against this thing, and it's one person or one family against a whole lot of wishes of many of us. And you need to be aware of that as you make your decisions, that there is a serious current of that, and it's not healthy, but it is something that can be remedied. So please consider that in your actions that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ashley Braun. I am a resident of 607 Reservoir Road. I'm also a director on the board, helped volunteer at the golf tournament yesterday. Now, I prepared something to say earlier, but it echoes what Jackie said and what Joanna said. I know our government is based on checks and balances, and there is a bylaw that was, the last lines of the amendment, the last laws of the original order of conditions say that at the annual meeting or any time deemed necessary, the Lunenburg Conservation Committee can update, halt, or require any activities or reporting it feels to protect Lake Shirley's environment and the health of the public affected by any management activities. Before last Wednesday's meeting was closed, another one of my neighbors had asked the board to just cite the reasons for health or environmental reasons as to why all these changes were made. And it was actually, the Sentinel ran an article, and this is direct from the Sentinel. It said, Morrow, meaning I'm assuming that's Matt Morrow, said 95% of the changes made to the order of conditions were refinements to the language. So if these changes are just merely refinements, how does that justify an environmental or health issue in which these changes should have been made, above and beyond what the DEP has directed us? That if we wish to extend an order of conditions, they can either extend or deny it. Otherwise, we'd file a new notice of intent. If they had decided they didn't like our order of conditions and they denied us back in September, we would have done taken all the appropriate steps to file a new notice of intent and have those changes that conservation deemed necessary added in. Then we would have gotten our opportunity to appeal. So unfortunately, as a resident, as a member of the board, with my neighbors, there's this disappointment that I personally feel like we were misled, that these changes were allowed. And I feel like if these changes are made to the extension and that extension is submitted, we've taken away those checks and balances. You've taken away our right as a volunteer association, as you know, to appeal any of those. So where's the government there? Where's the checks and balances? So as a resident, as a neighbor, a friend of this town, an advocate for this town, an advocate for the lake, I really am extremely disappointed and frustrated with conservation. I personally have gone to many meetings. The chair has been rude to me. I ask clarifying questions sometimes, and I think he loses patience with me. And that's because I'm trying to see the perspective of the board and understand where they're coming from and listen to my peers that have lived on the lake and my friends that have lived on the lake and try to see the middle ground and try to have an open mind and say, these changes are relevant, these ones aren't, let's work together. And it's really hard when somebody continues to shut you down. So I'm asking, when you do have your session and you discuss this, or if you invite us back and add us to the agenda, please be open-minded. Please listen to all the sides. Because unfortunately last week, our opportunity to speak and have questions answered, like what those reasons were to make all those changes, we were shut down. And that's not how government's supposed to work. That's not how this community is supposed to work, at least in my view. Thank you.
I will reiterate that it is my intent, and I'm sure the intent of this board, to take this very seriously. I obviously hear the passion in everybody's voice. I hear the frustration. We will, I know it was recorded, so we will get the recordings if anybody on this board hasn't already heard them. So I can tell you, I go in not knowing anything about this, so I go in about as open-minded as one can be, because I really don't know the history. I'm interested in knowing the history. I'm interested in hearing from all sides, and we will keep you apprised of every step along the way. So thank you for that. At the risk, is there any other person? All right. I do thank you for all coming. I mean, it makes a big statement when there's a large group. Clearly, it's not one person who's saying something. It's a whole body. That means a whole lot more. Not that one person doesn't mean something, but obviously a whole body complaining or bringing something to our attention has a certain weight behind it. So we do appreciate you coming forward, and we will keep you abreast of everything that happens in this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 7:05, as one of my predecessors would say, right on time. A poll petition hearing for Pine Grove Road Plan number 965-L by Unitil, Fitchburg Gas and Electric.
Can I ask you, are you doing these to go into the appointment section? You're going to discuss appointments this evening at Allen Banks, correct?
Yes.
so far from who I
Yes.
am.
Should we stay to reiterate again, or, like, for the appointment section part, should we be there for that dialogue as well?
If you'd like, that's your personal choice.
Yeah. Okay.
I think, are we actually reappointing people? We're not actually reappointing
Right,
people, we're talking about the process.
Right, and
Right.
you're gonna see if there's talent banks available?
That's one of
That's
the
what we
things
had
that'll be
hoped for, yeah.
discussed.
Yes, perfect.
Yes, okay.
That would be good.
Okay. So do we have somebody here from Unitil?
Thanks.
What?
I
No
think
one from Unitil is here?
yeah. Okay, I thought so.
Oh. Sorry.
We're all coming back to hear the poll hearing. I'm Jim D. with Unitil, and I'm here tonight to get permission to set 2 polls on Pine Grove Road in Lunenburg for a new single-family home. The address of the home is 150 Cross Road, but the driveway is going to be on Pine Grove Road, and the section down by Cross Road where we do not have any poles. Therefore, I don't know if anybody's seen the sketch.
We have the diagram.
Okay.
What is the address of the new home?
The new home is 150 Cross Road.
Well, okay, so that bottom property, okay.
Yeah, right, that property right
Okay.
there. But the entrance driveway will be on Pine Grove Road.
Right.
So basically, we just need 2 poles to, for service that house.
So I'm going to ask something that I always asked
Okay.
about these. I'm not a huge fan of like lines continuing across the street. You're going to put in 2 poles, you're going to cross Pine Grove Road, and then you're going to cross Pine Grove Road again.
Right.
And the reason for that?
Basically, it's for Guyan purposes. If we try to put a pole both on the same side of, the second pole could be on the other side of the street, but same side of the street as the first pole, but the house is on the opposite side of the street. So if he wants to go underground, we'd have to set another pole on the other side of the street on his property.
But so why is the first pole, the intermediate pole, why can't it be on the same side?
It would be, if we put the first pole on the left side of the street, it would be going through his property, and it wouldn't be in the road taken. The wires would be crossing his property. Just take that pole, bring it over to the right, you know, now that section of wire would be going through the woods, and then I'd have to put an anchor into the street to continue up the street. We have to guy all of these poles so they don't lean when we pull the wires tight. So we put it on the right side, we have an anchor on the right side, and then we cross back over because that house is on the left. And we put an anchor on that pole.
Are all poles guyed? I haven't seen
If they're
it.
not in a straight line, then we have to guy them. And the dead-end guy always gets guyed because the wires are, pulling it.
Well, that I
Yeah.
can understand.
Yeah. But if they're not in a straight line, the wires are going to pull them over.
To me, it's just unsightly
Yeah.
to see
Yeah, and then-
wires continually crossing
Yeah,
the street.
and then the other thing, I mean, if you're going across the road like that, you're keeping it in the road and you don't have to cut any trees. You're in the roadway. So you can leave, the nice trees. But there will be some trimming needed out here because it's never been trimmed, because there's never been lines out there.
Mr. Chair, does this request also have to get approved by the planning board?
No.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we approve the poll request for Pine Grove Road, Plan Number 965-L for Unitil Fitchburg Gas and Electric.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. 62 Cross Road, where is the house? Looking at the map that's presented to us, where's the house over there? Or rather, where's their driveway?
The driveway is going to, if you see the pole, it's going to be just to the left of that pole if you're looking at the sketch there.
And the driveway for 150 Cross Road?
It's going to be for one, yes.
Which is
Yeah.
what this is for, correct?
What is it for?
I understood it to
Oh.
be for 150.
For 150 Cross Road.
Correct. So
Yeah,
where is
right.
their driveway going to
The
be?
driveway
depicted?
is, if you're looking at the second pole in up Pine Grove Road, just to the left of that.
All right. And so that, just so I'm clear, that what I'm understanding you saying is you're going to put a pole close to someone's driveway,
Right.
and the alternative to that would be to do some land clearing at 150 Cross Road. Meaning, if the landowner of 150 Cross Road were to clear the land, right? So that way, what I'm looking at, number 14, roughly the pole there, to where the pole's connecting to, would that be feasible if they were to clear that land?
And put both poles on his property?
Yes.
Well, the problem we have is now he's the only one we can ever serve off of that. If they're in the right-of-way, we can continue up the street and we can serve other houses off of those poles, but if they're on his property, we can't, go serve other houses off of those poles.
Right, the poles are on municipal land, which is why you're here.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we go up the road, there's a house, if there's a house built on the right, we can use that pole and continue up the street. But if we go across his property, then we can't.
I want to ask for a clarification. I don't think Mr. Jeffries is talking about putting it in the middle of his property. I think he's talking about bringing it across the street.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Oh,
What I
and keeping
asked
it
you-
on municipal right-of-way?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, then we get, we may have aerial trespass crossing 150 to get to that pole. I'm trying to keep it within the road, taking the wires, the poles, and without cutting a lot of trees. And then we have a reverse corner, so the next pole up the street would have to be on the right, and his house is on the left. I've been doing this for 30 years, so this is the best practice. I
Mr.
can
Chair,
see.
can we ask if there are any abutters here?
Are there any abutters here?
And the abutters were notified.
And they were notified. One of the things we've asked in the past, and I see that Mr. Jeffries asked about, and they're not on here, is, again, we always ask for where the driveways are, so that it's clear to us where they are. I mean, you're explaining where they are, but, it's a whole lot easier if you see it on the plan.
Oh, yeah, yep.
So this was a large bone of contention many times. At least now you're giving us actual dimensions, which they didn't do before. They
Yeah,
put them on the back of a napkin and submit it to us, and we had them resubmit them. So,
I pulled it up on the maps. It's pretty heavily wooded in that area. I don't think there are any existing driveways except for the one they're putting in, so they wouldn't show up on his map.
okay.
So 62 and 35.
Yeah, I searched for 62, so
Yep.
the red dot's 62. They're putting it over here.
yeah, it's just, the driveway's going to be to the left of that pole. I mean, I can email that sketch tomorrow if you'd like to see it.
No, we're not going to hold it up this time. But again, I'm just asking.
Yeah, right, yeah. I mean, we sent this in a month ago. Somebody could have said, oh, there's no driveway. I could have put it on there.
Yes, you're right. And somebody could have listened to all the times we've asked them to put them on there and submitted it with them on to
Yeah, I
begin with.
think
So we can play this. I'm not
I know
interested in playing the game, but we can play
every
that
time
too.
it's a new thing, because, I mean, what do I come, one a year, so kind of forget.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
It passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If we can make a note, my no is simply because I'm fully aware that we've asked Unitil several times to present drawings that depict driveways, and they consistently won't do it.
Well, they have, and then they don't, so I don't know. It's just ease for them. Okay, we have to sign these. These are by the clerk, Mr. McQuaid. 710 appointment, a one-day wine and malt license for June 8th, 2019, Dragonfly Garden Cafe at 3 Lancaster Avenue.
Yes,
Welcome.
hi. Jocelyn Schneider. I'm with Dragonfly Garden Cafe
A
at
little louder so everybody can hear you guys.
Jocelyn Schneider. I'm with Dragonfly Garden Cafe. We're located in the center of town at 3 Lancaster Ave. We're hoping to offer a 6-course tasting menu that highlights all that the community has to offer. We're working with several farms to incorporate into our 6-course menu. It's a small plates menu, and we're hoping to pair local beer and wine, probably 3 or 4 of each, for a tasting portion with each course. So we're working with Highland Farms for beef and Stoneman's for butter and milk, and Smokestack Roasters in Lunenburg. We have a roaster for coffee. So we're hoping to highlight for guests to experience what we have here. And we are specifically doing it after the Lunenburg Arts Festival so that people can have a day in Lunenburg and go to the Arts Festival and come have dinner with us in the center of town. So it's $60 per person. Wine. And we have
a reduction?
Yeah, no, it's $68 per person,
Okay,
all inclusive. Yeah. So if you're out in town, come in and have dinner in the center of town.
What is the time from when to when?
At 4:30, we're hoping guests can come over and gather. We have 24 seats for guests. It's a small dinner party style, so you would meet other Lunenburg or locals for some sangria and a cheese plate, and then sit down for a 6-course dinner at a nice long table with an abundance of local products and items from all the makers in the area.
Nice.
Until, what is the ending?
7:30. So 4:30 to 7:30, a 3-hour dinner party.
Excellent.
So I would make a motion that we approve the one-day wine and malt license for June 8th, 2019 for the Dragonfly Garden Cafe at 3 Lancaster Ave.
Second.
Any further comment or questions for the applicant?
Sounds nice.
Great. And we're open on the weekends,
The
so
one thing I would
visit.
ask, I know this
Yes.
is, I think, the first time you've come before
Yep.
us. I would try to give us a little more notice.
Yes.
This is really
We-
coming in under the wire on Tuesday before the Saturday, so.
Exactly.
But otherwise, obviously, I think it's a great community event, and I would encourage people to go. And I would, seeing no further comment, everybody in favor of the license, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None is unanimous. And when can she pick up the? Tomorrow.
I'll be foraging more local ingredients tomorrow anyway, so I'll stop by. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
This needs other people's signatures too.
Okay, 7:20, special event permit discussion. Mr. Bernie,
Hello again.
welcome.
Welcome, new and renewed members, and I'm happy to be back. I'm kind of like a bad penny. I keep showing up. Before town meeting back at the end of April, with the members of the previous board, we had a public hearing of sorts to discuss the special event permit, and I went home with about a dozen items to sort of touch up, and you should have a document either in your drive or in front of you that reflects 11 of those 12 discussion items. The one that isn't changed is the 6 o'clock start time. That was noted to be something the board discussed and gave input on. I don't know if you'd like me to run through the changes, if you just want to
Assuming
sort
the
of...
changes are the red?
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct.
Thank you. If you'd like to go through them?
Like to or willing to?
It's the second time tonight, obviously I have to stop being polite. Will you please go through?
Yes. So we talked a lot about updating the definition of special event. And this is something that we've sort of wrestled with since the board sort of asked that we kind of craft something like this. So rather than scrap what we had, I tried to build upon it to make it a little bit clearer as to what impacts and effects we were trying to mitigate. And so you'll notice in the first sentence, the red talks about the effects of ordinary use of parks, playgrounds, field, public streets, rights of way, or sidewalks, as a clarifying on what sort of triggers it. I know we've talked about number of people, and number of people can really be a mixed bag. If you put a cap of 50, which I think was in maybe the original draft, 50 people in some places can seem overburdensome, and in other places it's like, well, it's only 50 people. So what I'm trying to balance is what the intent of this is. And my understanding was the request was to try and mitigate negative or ancillary off-site effects that would be burdensome on the town, the area, or the community. We talked about...
So I don't know, do you want to do them in pieces, or do you want to go over all the 11 things?
I'll defer to your decision on that. I mean, it's ultimately the board's decision. I mean, I've been working on this at the board's pleasure.
I understand. And I understand there's a lot of history
Or
here.
pain, depending on which side of it you're on. So I'm happy to do them one by one. That it's probably the easiest way to do it.
The board have any preference of how they'd like to do these? Would they prefer Mr. Bernie go through all 11 and then we review them?
I think, I can read them. So I don't know if he needs to.
Well, for the public, I want them to be, I want him to go through them at least. So
I don't
it's
have
not-
a preference.
All right, let you go all through them and then
Okay.
we'll review.
We talked about deleting the recurring events, so that was deleted. There was a lot of discussion about how zoning plays with this, and we had it in, we had taken it out, and ultimately I believe that some hybrid of that is what we wanted, so we added the language of uses and activities permitted through, that the is superfluous, through Chapter 250 of the Code of Lunenburg, and associated with the existing primary use of the site where they take place shall not be considered to be special events. So this would cover power sports having a new model bonanza where they bring a food truck and a DJ and everybody comes and gets to tool around the parking lot on the new quad or whatever. It might cover Elena if she were to have a wine tasting that was on site within her business. Those sorts of things that are permitted for commercial businesses and associated with those businesses on their properties. There was a request to note that the select board can impose conditions, so during the review and permit issuance process, the select board reserves the right to impose additional reasonable conditions to any special event permit. There was a lot of discussion about exemptions and loopholes and what should be exempted. So originally we had sporting events and town events separate. What I heard and sort of what I took away was they could be all encompassed under town. So I changed that language a little bit. Town events held on town property, comma, including school and town league sporting events permitted by the Lunenburg Public Schools and/or Lunenburg Parks Department. So that would cover your Little League, your soccer, your Bengals football, that kind of stuff that is a regular event. And even if they were to have some sort of tournament or bonanza that went along with it, those would go. So the second bullet came out, and then the real loophole was events held by private membership organizations and, the potential to create membership organizations. And this exemption came about based on homeowners associations and events that they hold for their membership. So in taking that, I tried to tighten it up and say events held by homeowners associations located on common property held by said association and for its membership. So this would eliminate things that the village at Flat Hill chooses to do within the bounds of their community on property they own. Hickory Hills has numerous properties that they own and hold a number of events for their members. So the idea was to try and allow those without causing too much disruption because they're regular use of those properties, and but not make it sort of open to people just creating membership organizations. Timing, again, there was a discussion about 6 o'clock being too early for start or setup. Then we get into page 2, adding a 48-hour time limit from the close of the event for cleanup to happen before the town takes it on and bills any potential or any event organizer. Signs, we added a section talking about approved signs required by the town of Lunenburg, may be required by the town to assist in traffic or communicate any restrictions, roads closed, that sort of thing. The smoking language was updated. It was submitted by a citizen. Smoking is prohibited in or on all town of Lunenburg properties, including on school grounds and all parks, fields, and/or playgrounds. Tents and sleeping trailers was updated to have the correct square footage, which is 400. We get down to enforcement on page 3. There was a request to be clearer about enforcement actions and indicate that the board would look unfavorably about violations for future permits for organizers. So we added that in the first paragraph. Town of Lunenburg Police, Fire, and other staff so designated by the town manager may inspect the premises prior to and during special events for compliance with the permit and any conditions issued by the select board. Violations of the approved permit will require corrective action, and depending on the severity of the violation may result in the revocation of the special event permit. Multiple and/or repeated violations may result in a prohibition from applying for future permits for the event organizer. And then the second paragraph is a restatement of what the previous first paragraph was about police, fire, or other staff being able to eject people from town property if so necessary. And finally, the last paragraph was added, and it's just a note of people's appeals powers under Chapter 249, Section 4 of the general laws. This is not specific to this policy. It's as I understand, an omnibus catch-all for appeals of municipal decision-making that people are aggrieved by.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mrs. Adams.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you, Adam. This has been around for a long time, and I think every time we've halted on approving it, it has been looking for what is an unintended consequence. And most of those adaptations of language really, I think, organize unintended consequences of a policy, and I think it's a better policy because of all these edits, so thank you, because I know we have cycled it a lot, and I think the way a lot of that reads takes out a lot of those but what ifs, or we might accidentally have dones, and so I feel really good about those edits.
Thank you.
Other members?
On the timing, I do believe 6 a.m. is too early.
I had a question on that because that was born out of like if somebody was putting together like a marathon that started early, could we define a varied time, or because I know what you mean, like if it's like a rock concert at 6 a.m. it's too early, but if somebody's prepping to start a turkey trot, then it's an appropriate time for a special event depending upon, or fishing derby might start early.
Again, we have the ability to further condition any of these things. That's just a baseline.
Right,
start.
but so on the timing, the actual specific timing aside, I'll point out by the way, first of many issues with definition. So it says events are prohibited from conducting activities, but what are activities? Is setting up an activity? Or is actually the event, the actual events of the special event, or activity something that involves the actual opening of the event? So if it takes me 3 hours to set up something and people come at 9, am I allowed to set up at 6?
So could we set a later time but exclude setup? That an event would begin?
Yeah, I think we'd have to do something with that. And we have to define what activities mean.
Well, and I think like Damon said, there's language in there that we have additional reasonable conditions. So if it's like a 24-hour rock concert, then we can reasonably condition that the noise is more appropriate, like we've done recently.
So, I mean...
Yeah, I mean, I can foresee that you may be setting up earlier, but for an event to actually begin, I think 6 is too early.
What time would you like?
I'd like 8, actually.
How do people feel about 8?
Well, so first thing, what are you trying to avoid? Is it noise?
Yes.
Okay, so when are you allowed to mow your lawn in Lunenburg?
We have no
Whenever you
noise
want.
ordinance.
Whenever you want?
I mean, there are disturbing the peace statutes, but
Right.
I think
I'd like them to coincide with that. When there was a discussion of this at town meeting
We have no
regarding
noise
the
ordinance.
noise ordinance. Now, that didn't pass, but there was discussion about this, that some things already existed.
And I can look into that. My understanding was stuff like lawn mowing or leaf blowing was harder to quantify in the disturbing the peace statute, but I can speak to the chief about that.
Okay.
I believe I recently had a conversation where they can interfere, and I think you might have talked about it at our meeting. Within reason, they can interfere when there's noise, but we have no formal policy. So they can make a request that noise be eliminated upon a visit, but we have no formal noise policy with any hours. That failed. But I'd be comfortable with 8.
I think 8's kind of late. But, I mean, if I can speak just broadly, because I have, you know, I know we're having this discussion. I want to share my general views are. I mean, we are a town within a state within, you know, the United States of America. And our government, and we have the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of this conversation, you know, and of course the way we end it with, you know, liberty and justice for all. I am fundamentally opposed to the town, to this board taking any steps that restrict other people's liberty. Now, there is a unique problem here in which we have, you know, I've talked to residents on Holman Street and I support them. And, you know, and part of the concern, as I understand it, is that we have, without getting on to the backstory, but there's a backstory here, that there's an issue going on Holman Street, and that there's legal process involved now, there's all these appeals going on, and I mean, you know, and the bottom line is, you know, a couple years back, there was a big festival, and I heard it from my house, and I live in Mass Ave, and it's problematic for neighbors. And so the neighbors, as I understand it, you know, there's a question of, hey, I live in a residential zone, which I strongly support residential activities only in residential zones. I live in a residential zone, and it seems as if my neighbor is not engaging in residential activities. If you own property in Lunenburg, or anywhere for that matter, if you choose to have people over your house, that is within your rights to do that. And if you choose to invite people over and you don't really know who all of them are, that is also within your rights to do that. And there's a limit, in my opinion, on how much your neighbor should be able to restrict what you do on your property in your house. And I'm concerned that, you know, as you start looking into the beginning of this, and it says a special event is any private event or activity held on public property or an event open to the general public, held on private property that affects the ordinary use of parks, yada, yada, yada. And this is special events may include, but are not necessarily limited to, athletic tournaments, concerts, fairs, festivals, holiday celebrations. So what I'm trying to envision here is the neighbor who really doesn't like you. And so now you're giving them a tool to call the police on you when you have people over for a holiday celebration. I'm not finished, Ms. Adams. When you have people over for a holiday celebration, and, you know, as we go on and we start giving we say, well, we're going to give exemptions. We're going to give exemptions if you're in a homeowners association. But if you just happen to be a regular homeowner, you don't get an exemption for that. So how are we protecting? Because I think before we start restricting, I think our first obligation is to protect the liberty of everyone. And I don't think that I think this does the exact opposite. So fundamentally, I don't support this.
Okay, and I can respect that. And I think there's a couple of points. The first is you wouldn't call the police. I mean, you might call the police, but this policy doesn't give the police powers when someone calls and says, hey, the guy I don't like next door has 50 people over and they're singing Christmas carols on his back deck, and, you know, they've had a little too much eggnog.
But when it appears to affect the right-of-way, so there's cars parked in the street.
Well, but again, it says the general public. So if, I'm going to use you because that's easy. You have an event, let's say, you know, 4th of July, I want to get nuts. And you invite your friends and family, and one of your friends brings 2 of his friends, and your sister brings her boyfriend and his brother and his cousin. That's not really the general public. They're within your sphere. If you go and you tack a poster up at Hannaford that says, come to Michael Ray Jeffries' house, we're going to get crunk and shoot off fireworks and celebrate 4th of July, that's the general public. You're asking anybody who sees this this invite to come.
No, but wouldn't this policy require some agent of the town to have to assess whether or not it's the general public or just people that you know? Which then is an invitation for police to come, or whomever, to come onto your property to question what in the world you're doing if it's a holiday celebration. I mean,
Mr. Chair, if I may enter the conversation again.
Mrs. Adams.
Okay. One thing is I think this is just special event permitting guidelines. So this is to give people guidelines when they're showing up to ask for a permit.
Correct.
So it's not looking to police or inject. It's just if somebody comes in to us and says, I need to permit an event, Adam has created special event permit guidelines. And I believe a lot in being sure there's no overreach, and that's a lot of the edits made sure there was no unintended consequences of over permitting. Our town manager said it the best, and so I always repeat it when we visit this topic. There's 4 categories of things that occur when we're talking about events, and there's private events on private property. I have birthday hike, like 40 kids show up. That's me inviting a private group of people to my property, so that's not a part of this. Private on private. Public on public, that's all the sports, homecoming, any public event that's on our municipal land, it's not a part of seeking a permit. The 2 times where this is triggered is if somebody wants to have a private event on public land, maybe they want to hold a private event at the gazebo, they would have to seek permission to use the municipal land. Then a public event on private property. And I think we've been very clear that public really means it's being advertised, you're asking for people to come, you're somehow maybe soliciting tickets or sales. And so it's only going to come into play when somebody comes in, I need a special permit. We have no guidelines. So when people come in for special permits, we've faced a lot of confusion the last year that I've been here, but I've followed things for a very long time, where you're trying to decide whether or not somebody can have a special event permit with no guidelines whatsoever. So this is trying to give us consistency, so every time somebody comes, we have an understanding of how we're consistently operating. And so I think this is really for private on public, public on private, and big Super Bowl parties, birthday parties, holiday parties. They don't fall under any jurisdiction where this doesn't intersect with police activity at all. Things like parking, we have in town parking policies and procedures where the police department comes to, usually in the summer, all the policies and procedures are gone through, and how people can park on the side of the road is dictated by their policies regardless of this. On the types of roads, the widths of roads, and things like that. So I don't think we've added anything in here that's like a new law. I think we're just trying to have consistency with requests.
Here's a question, though.
I believe that what you just explained is exactly what this is trying to do. I think it does it very badly. That's what I would say. First of all, okay, so by this definition, just by here and what you said, so if I have something on my private property that's open to the public, then I need a special permit. Is that what I heard you say?
If you have an event open to the public on private property, yes.
Okay, so if I have a
Because you're
yard
zoned
sale, so if I have a
residentially.
yard sale, I need a special permit. That's where the definition starts failing. I don't mean to poke a hole in your particular, I know what this is trying to do, but right away, the special events section that defines a special event is so poorly explained that it catches things that you shouldn't catch. The other thing is, when you start saying, and this came up at the planning board's public hearing, and I agreed with them when they brought this up, because I thought about this myself, if something is open to the public on a private piece of property, then first of all, there's easy ways around that. If I say to somebody on a Facebook page that, hey, I'm having people over for X, I want them to look at my etchings or something, and they say, and I say, but you can't, it's not open to the public, but if you private message me and I invite you, then you're allowed. So then, is that a private part? Is that public or is that private? You know, so we're not explaining. If you say to me that I think if you put posters out and it's going to have more than so many people at one time, that you're expecting so many people at one time, I mean, I think there's a list of criteria that we need to define that somebody can go through as a guideline and say, yeah, this event applies to me. We're going to play, it's going to be a multi-day event. So right away, I think multi-day events automatically trigger a special event. And when I was on the Board of Selectmen last, and the unifier issue came up, I said that publicly. I said, I'm not even sure that the applicant needed to be before us, because we have no guidelines and we have no permitting for multi-day events. I encouraged the board to adopt one, and I think this should be it, especially for multi-day events. Everything else gets very close to just needing an entertainment license, in my view. Everything else here that we have should be covered by an entertainment license. But if you want people to be overnight, or you want people to go more than one day, that's when this should be triggered. That is, I think, a clear encapsulation for me of what we're trying to do, or what triggered this to begin with. Again, in my view.
And I would also, you know, I work in the city for the most part. I'm in the Boston area most days. And, you know, what they don't have is what we do have, which is open land. And so there certainly is a shortage, right? I mean, there's only so much land we have. And if I decided that, hey, I'm going to put up a poster in the middle of Watertown that says a bus will come on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, and if you want to enjoy the day out in my backyard, I'll have a barbecue for you and whatever, I don't think my neighbors have the right to restrict me from doing that. And I don't understand what would give them the right to say that I can't do that. Now, if I'm having a party and it's 10 o'clock at night, I'm blasting music, I understand that there's an impact. And I think that we should have something that restricts people from blasting music at 10 o'clock at night. As an example, I live next to open fields, and someone came down with a dirt bike and a four-wheeler. And the first night, hey, they have the right to do it. I didn't say anything. You know, on the third night, I was like, well, this is getting kind of annoying. You know, it's 8 o'clock at night and they're riding dirt bikes. On the fourth night, a week later, they showed up at 8:15 p.m. to start riding their dirt bikes and other stuff. And at that point, one of the neighbors finally called the cops, because I didn't want to be the one to do it, because I thought it would look bad as a selectman. But and the police showed up and yada, yada, yada. They're not doing this stuff anymore. So I get it that, you know, there is a point at which your activities start to affect someone. You know, you got kids, you shouldn't have to hear dirt bikes at 10 p.m. on a Thursday night, right? But I'm not sure, let me rephrase, I'm not sure. I don't like the idea of us imposing restrictions on what other people do on their land, and getting to the detail of it can be your family, but once it's people you don't know, should your government be getting into your business on that level?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
I'm saying address that to people at large. Sure. I don't think that your government should.
Mrs. Adams.
Sure. I think what we have in this whole conversation that's gone on for a very long time is the idea of freedom belongs to the abutters as well. And they have the freedom to be in a residential neighborhood. And so even a one-day event that has 500 people and a lot of noise is really, in my mind, a very special event, because it's going to directly impact, if I'm the abutter, my day. My day may have been gardening and sipping lemonade. And so freedom belongs to everybody in a town, and that's why these things have compromise. Because if everybody has the freedom to go through a red light or go as fast as they need to go to get to work, then we're living free. And we have regulations because we have to find a balance amongst each other. And so in a town, we're dealing with residential properties here. There's a restriction on commercial that we added in. And so residentially speaking, the neighbor has freedom to the neighbor, and we need to have balance and conversation. We've been working on this for a very long time, so I'm going to make a motion that the selectmen adopt the special event permit guideline as we see here, because we need a policy and we can always improve the policy. So I'll start over. I make a motion that we approve the Town of Lunenburg special event permit guidelines here with the edits, just making 2 changes. One, that we would put in an exemption that it does not include yard sales, and one that we would change the time from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m.
I would like to, before anybody seconds it, I'd like to, I have the chance for people, it is a large thing, and I want people weighing in from everywhere, so I don't want to rush to a motion and rush to a vote here. So I would like to, I mean, there's still a lot of the things that Adam read that we haven't even discussed yet. So I'd like to be able to discuss them.
Sure, we have had a lot of history here in public hearings and things, so I don't see it necessarily as a rush, because whether you're a citizen or you're up here, you certainly could have been following along during a very long and drawn-out conversation. But I do have the right to make the motion.
Yeah, you actually have the right to make the motion.
And people do have the right to make a second.
I'm not impinging on your right. I'm suggesting that you hold it. But if you want to have the motion, fine.
No, I do.
I'll make a second for the point of discussion.
Okay, so now we can get on with the discussion. So, does anybody, I mean, I've obviously followed this too. Any of the existing members who have not spoken want to speak to any of this?
Well, I'd certainly like to speak to it. I kind of disagree with the whole notion of cutting off, making a motion and seconding it cuts off debate from the public, which I would.
Well, I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it open to
Okay,
the public.
good.
I'm not going to call for a vote until we've discussed it, so that's fine.
Yeah, I agree a lot with Mr. Jeffries on a lot of what he said here. Because bylaws like this end up affecting a lot more people than you anticipate. And it affects the well-intentioned people more than the not well-intentioned people.
And it's not a bylaw, it's just selectman policy.
Still, if anyone looks up
I'm
how.
just saying.
Okay, and I'm just saying.
Okay, it is a policy, yes.
That if anyone looks up, how do I have a permit, and they read through this guideline, they probably aren't clear if this applies to them or not. And there should be no confusion when someone looks at this, if it applies to them or not. Because most people just won't ask the question, they just won't do whatever they're planning to do, or they'll just do it without asking permission at all, which is not productive either. So again, I think this applies to too many people. I could see, as Mr. Alonso said, applying to multi-day activities, or maybe you narrow it down to for-profit activities. So you take away homeowners having to go through this for events with their friends or not so good of friends or people they just met. But still, I think it applies to too many things. Too many activities could be classified under this if you wanted to. And just exempting yard sales doesn't get the job done.
Mr. Bernie.
If I may, I think that's a well-made point, because that's essentially been the crux of this is for-profit entities using public using private property for their enterprises in a way that is impactful on the neighborhood and the community. And I understand the chair's point about this automatically applying to multi-day events. I will say that there have been people who have asked about single-day events who wanted guidance similar to this. And that's not to say that this is the perfect document for them. But above, I don't want to say above board, people who provide events of this manner often approach municipal employees or elected officials and say, I want to do an event in your community, how do I do it? And currently it's sort of an ad hoc discussion amongst department heads. And we do our best to be consistent between everyone that we talk to about these things, but sometimes the facts of the event change this or that, and this would at least give someone a good base to come and say, here's my event, I looked at this policy and this is what you've sort of laid out, this is how we want to conduct our event and we believe that it fits within this. So I think, and again, not looking to push this, because honestly, if the board said, we don't like it, we don't want to do it, I'll go back and work on the next thing that I have to work on. We've put a lot of work into this, but I also understand that attitudes change and people change. But I think that what this does is it makes it almost easier in some ways to hold an event in the community, because it's not reaching out to whoever you think would be the right person. Some people reach out to the police chief, some reach out to the town manager, and so I think that the for-profit entities is really where the concern lies.
Okay, so, and nowhere in this document does it say that.
That's correct.
So, my point is that if you're going to, I am not looking to negate all the work.
No, and I don't think that you are.
And I'm not necessarily saying it just to you. I'm saying it to people in the room and people who are listening or who will listen later. That I think that what we're trying to do is fine. I think that we're not doing it well.
Okay.
A document like this should first and foremost be able to be distributed to someone who is of reasonable intelligence and be able to read it, and they should be able to know whether they qualify for it or not. And in order to do that, I believe, it needs to have a very enumerated list of parameters, of which, and I'll give an example, maybe we list 10 things, and if you check off 3 of these, that you definitely need one of these. Or if you check off one of these 2, it's a multi-day or it's for profit, you automatically need one. But maybe ones that don't fit those 2 also may need one. If you expect, as Mrs. Adams said, I agree with her. If you're going to expect that 500 people are going to show up, then that needs a permit. I don't think there's anybody in this room would think otherwise. But you need to know that. And then, of course, if people play games, and that's why I am for the penalties in here against homeowners. If you consistently, if you misunderstand how many people may show up once, that may be fine. But if you consistently do it, then it's a problem, and then we need to address it, and the enforcement part of it or the future permitting process can take care of that. But you should know, if I need to have 10 people over, I shouldn't need anything, again, unless it's a for-profit event. And there's all these criteria that we should be put. We should focus heavily on the definition of what a special event is. And then all the rest of the components will kind of fall into place. And I think what we're missing, and I said this from your position at the podium as before I was on the board, and I've said it at the planning board, and other people have said it from the planning board, I just don't think the definitions work right now, and I think it's premature. I do think we should get together, and I think we should refine it, because I think it is possible to do that. Music, do you have amplification? That would be one thing that may trigger it. What times the events are going to be? Are they at night? Are they in the morning? Are they in the afternoon? So these are the reasons that as it stands here, I also think there's pieces, I want to stand by the definition part the strongest, but there are other parts too, like we don't even talk about, if you're going to have this, there should be a public hearing. I don't see anywhere in here that requires a public hearing, and who has to pay for the public hearing, who has to be notified about the event. I mean, these are all things that exist in other permitting processes that we have in town that we should include. And I'd rather not adopt something and say, oh, we'll fix it later, because I'll reiterate one of my favorite business book titles. If we don't have time to do it right, when are we going to have time to do it over? I'd rather do it right and just get it passed right.
And I like to add on to, wholly agree with what you just said, Mr. Alonso. My point in speaking earlier, all my previous comments, there has to be a clear differentiation between someone who's just has a large family and likes them coming over every Saturday, and someone someone who likes to go into cities and grab a whole bunch of folks to come enjoy their land, and someone who's doing for-profit activities, who is disturbing the peace, who has tents in their backyard, all those kind of things, has a big pit. I mean, there's a series of activities, right, that is different than just the normal stuff that people should be able to do. And I also want to be clear that we're not empowering people who just may happen to disagree with you to start saying, hey, my neighbor is engaging in X amount of activity, and therefore now we need to get the police over to figure out, are the people here people they actually know? Are they like third cousins? I want to be clear that we're not asking our government to step into an unregulated zone.
There's no activity in here to go seeking.
Well, no, Ms.
People's
Adams.
events. This is to guide people when they come in for one.
However,
so there's no authority that's going to go out and seek activities. And people have the right to call the police on anything they feel necessary, anyways. And so that would stay a possibility for any event ever. Is that any abutter could call the police out of a concern for anything, but I feel a little confused because when it starts off, it does define a special event is any private event or activity held on public property or an event open to the general public held on private property that affects the ordinary use of parks, playgrounds, fields, public streets, right-of-way, or sidewalk.
Right.
So we have defined it.
Which is
Yes,
everything.
and that, so I'll just point
Everything
out
you
that
do
that
at your
sentence,
house.
I will just point out that that sentence makes no sense, by the way. So, a special event is any private event or activity held on public property or an event open to the general public held on private property that affects the ordinary use of parks, playgrounds, fields, public streets, right-of-way, or streets. So, if I have an event on a private property and it doesn't affect use of parks or it doesn't affect playgrounds and doesn't affect fields and doesn't affect public streets or rights-of-ways or sidewalks, then I don't apply.
Open to the general, if it's open to the general
Yeah,
public.
but the phrase that Mr. Burney added, that affects the ordinary use of parks. If my event doesn't affect ordinary use of parks, playgrounds, fields, public streets, the wording is incorrect. It applies a clause to the private property event that nobody would qualify for.
And I think, you have birthday parties, right, where you're having your 7-year-olds having their friends over. I mean, how many people have enough parking spaces in their own driveway for that many cars? And so once you are parking those vehicles on a public right-of-way or affecting a street, now by having this guideline, my fear is that you're empowering the neighbor to feel as if they now have a tool, just to kind of...
And point taken, and I understand that, so...
Parking policies already exist via the police department. Those aren't really a part of this, how the cars can be... I've sat through, and maybe, Heather, you can speak to that, but the policies that regulate the parking on the public right-of-ways are via the police department's policies already.
Right.
We have those.
The regulations.
But I think that there are multiple interpretations as we're all saying it, of what this means.
If I may ask a question, not to interrupt, but I think we're beating the definition to death. And so I'm hearing at least 2, possibly 3 of the board that feel the definition needs more refinement and to be more empirical. To hear exact. Yeah. Here's criteria. Choose these criteria, and depending on how you choose those criteria, you apply for a special event. If you've chosen criteria 1, 2, or 3, yes, or if you've chosen 3 of the 7 additional.
Yes.
Okay, so I get that. Yep. Let's take this definition. We'll put it to the side because it sounds like how we get to who needs a special event is really the big box that we need to pick up and figure out. Moving into the remainder of the document, can we touch on other issues that might come up so that if we can recraft this definition in a way that sort of mirrors some of the things that I've heard tonight and eliminate some of the potential issues, I want to make sure that we don't come back and we're like, yeah, you nailed the definition. Now we've got this other 3 pages of things to do.
We can move on.
Yes.
Okay? Again, we're going to have, there's still a motion, and I have not forgotten it, but we will discuss the rest of the document. So I would like to bring up the fact, and this came up during several iterations of the discussion, and that's at the end of the first column on the first page, where it says special event permit applications must be filed a minimum of 60 days prior to the event. Failure to do so may result in the denial of the application. And it was asked of the board, what is the, if somebody applies for this, what is the reasonable expectation of the applicant to get an answer? Like, how long does the board have to respond to this? It says that if you don't file it in 60 days, you may not get it. But there's no converse that you should expect that is reasonable. You will get some answer before 60 days.
I think if you do the timeline out, you can reasonably expect to have an answer in 45 days.
Okay.
And that would give you an additional 2 weeks if a document wasn't presented properly, or you brought something back that questions remained or needed to be amended.
And the reason I ask that is because if none is given, and somebody can just run out the clock and they don't want something to happen, and this discussion happened at one of the other selectmen's meetings again, that if we're going to have somebody go through a lot of hoops, they're going to get insurances, they're going to talk to the police, and they're going to do, you know, they're going to talk with the fire department, and they're going to do parking plans and everything. And then at the end, you know, oh, sorry, we didn't get to it. You didn't get us everything we needed to, and so we're not giving you the permit. I think that's unfair. I think somebody should be expecting, if they do it in the right timeline, to get an answer.
And that was, and this is sort of the discussion that was had at that meeting. And I don't have that meeting memorized, but my recollection was the board or members of the board at that time were concerned that putting a shot clock on the board allows for the potential of an applicant to undersubmit or withhold information, looking for the denial as a way to force the board's hand in litigation or other matters. So my recollection was that at the time the board wasn't in favor of putting some sort of language in there that put a time limit on the board's action.
Fair enough. But then I would suggest that number be up to 90 days.
Okay.
That means you may not get an answer if you don't do it in 90 days. And if you're going to have an event of this kind, I'm assuming that you can plan 3 months.
Yeah, one would expect 90 days to be.
Right. So that, I mean, I don't know how the board feels about that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Also, I think as we're going through this exemptions, we have a lake culture in our town on 2 different lakes. And, and I'm aware that there are
3 different lakes.
3 different lakes. That's right. Well, and I'm aware that there are, activities where one person may say, hey, I'm having a little get together. Whoever wants to ride their boat over here, come participate in it. And I just want to make sure that we're not going to start requiring those people to start submitting permits. And right now, the language isn't so clear. My intent was not to do that, because oftentimes those are ad hoc, and it would be the same as someone walking through the neighborhood and they see their neighbor, oh, hey, we've got some steaks, we're going to throw them on the grill. Why don't you and the kids come over, and so that's to me that's private on private for the most part. And if we really wanted to start splitting hairs, we could say it's private on public at Lake Whalum, but at Lake Whalum or at Lake Shirley. But I think that's even that's just it's an organic thing that happens more than. I don't think that there's a lot of times where people are advertising, let's make a flotilla and hang out in the middle of the lake and get crazy.
But I think this is getting back to the definition
Correct.
part, which we said we were going to table. So let's leave the definition part.
Okay, I'll withdraw my motion for these edits, and hopefully next time we've got a policy. Sorry, Adam. We're getting
I'll
there.
withdraw the second.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And the reason I made the motion is because I'd rather have a policy than to continue to operate without one. And we keep coming up with special events coming before us with no policy. So I'm just eager to have a policy, and we can edit a policy if we see a need for an adaptation.
Sure. But we have a new board. I mean, this is my second meeting.
Sure.
So, I think
But did you follow it as a citizen, perhaps?
I certainly did. However, as a member of the select board now, I think that it's reasonable that after an election, that the newest members of the board have a right to participate in the process. And that maybe what we should practice in doing is that one board does not leave for the next board work at the very end of their term.
Well, I think that's really unfair. Yeah, that's
Government
always
has a
gonna-
natural
Right.
continuum of forever.
Exactly.
And I also think that there were some mitigating circumstances dealing with this policy, but I want to touch on a couple of things that I've heard that I think will be added in. I don't think a yard sale exemption is going to be necessary with with the way that we've talked about changing the definition. Public hearing. So you would like a section outlining how the public hearing happens, who, if anyone, gets notice, what the advertising requirements are, that kind of thing. So that, I get.
I think that the event, once defined, is going to be of a sufficient nature that the abutters should be notified. Yes.
That
process we have in other.
Correct, and I probably incorrectly inferred that was a standard within the selectmen's policy and didn't look into it close enough, so it's something we can certainly add in here.
So then, if I may, I'll go to my next one.
Please do.
On the page 2, when it says special events may span multiple days and include on-site camping as permitted by the Board of Health, but shall not exceed 4 days. So first of all, this is the crux that I feel is the most important, all right? That, first of all, I think 4 days is ridiculously long to have a multi-day event, and certainly a multi-day event on private property. Like, I would at least limit that to 3. That's the extent of a long weekend, right? But when you start getting overnight campers, this is the thing where if we're going to talk about the public safety, if somebody comes to my house or somebody else at my neighbor's property and they have, some exhibit they want to, again, whatever that event might be, whether it's a gardening club or photography,
Papier-mâché heads.
recent ones in recent memory, that's one thing. I don't feel threatened if that happens in the middle of the afternoon on a Saturday. But if people, my neighbors, don't know, are camping on my neighbor's property, next to my property, and you don't know them, and there's lots of woods around, I'm sorry, this is a problem that I have, and that's why I think multi-day events really need to trigger this. And I don't think a 4-day event should even be considered. Personally, I could go down to 2, but I'm willing to even discuss 3, because I think this is really the crux of the matter is. Because you don't know what these people are going to do, especially if you don't know them. So stories about people wandering in the woods, abusing the conservation area and the Mulpus Brook and doing all these things. This I totally feel for that event, and so as a resident, this would be my biggest concern. And so a 4-day event to me would be way too long.
And to sort of doesn't answer the concerns that you've brought out, but the way the camping regulations are laid out. In order for someone currently, as I understand it through conversations with Mr. Gariffi from the Associated Boards of Health and feedback that I've gotten from the Board of Health, there's a very specific set of regulations to be able to qualify as a campground, and there's no variance currently to that, so you would have to meet the campground regulations, and so that would, I think, prohibit all but very select sites from doing that. And if I would infer that if one were to go through the process to be considered and registered as a campsite, that may become a focal point for events of multiple day with camping, which may raise some other issues, from zoning or other perspectives. And that doesn't necessarily change the fact that you don't know who's out in the woods and what they might be doing, but it does at least illustrate that it's not an easy or regular event that might happen.
I just think that this area should really invite the strictest scrutiny.
Sure.
Okay.
I agree.
And I would love input from the board. I chose 4 days because that's the longest event that had been permitted previously, and I didn't hear anything from the previous board or through our previous discussions about 4 days being overly excessive or any of the personal safety concerns that you raised.
I would offer to the board that we say no more than 3 days and no more than 2 overnights.
Two
so
nights,
that means
right.
3 nights, 3 days, 2 nights.
I would think that's
I
perfectly
think that's too
fine.
much. So
You think that's
I
too
think
much?
that's too much. 3 days and 2 nights.
Well, that means you start.
So
you start noon on a Friday, and you go to.
Maybe we could do that, but here's my concern. So if you live next to someone who's getting 4 permits a year as it's written now, what if they hit Memorial Day and they're hitting, 4th of July and they're hitting Labor Day? So you can't
Hopefully
enjoy.
those are when you're away.
Well, but with the impact though is that you can't enjoy any of those holidays at your own house because someone can have a 3-day event on each one of them.
I thought you wanted them to have the freedom. It can't be both ways.
Ms. Adams, I wholly support that we have the freedom, that we have the right to do and set up multi-day events.
It can't
what I
be
don't
both.
think is that this currently as written is doing that. I think it's bringing in too many folks. That's what I previously said. So as we talk about this, process, I'd like to see some kind of catch in there, so that way we can prevent people from having these on. Again, Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day.
So no freedom.
3-day events. Ms. Adams, your side comments are not appreciated.
Yes,
No, I know, I'm just
I would ask
exhausted
the
of-
board to keep the comments on target.
I'm sorry,
and
I
not toward each other,
apologize.
please. Okay.
We've worked a very long time on this, and it's just for special event permitting. And I think we have to each pick a consistent stance, and to say you don't like it because you want everyone to have freedom, and then to say that you want to heavily restrict something. We can't move forward if we have members that are arguing both sides
Well, I
of the
think his
outcome.
point with the freedom was by the definition, which we already agreed we were going to table. So if we can clean that up, I think we'll satisfy his freedom issues. This is a separate part of the document which he's talking about now.
So Mr. Jeffries, what would you suggest as opposed to what I said, 3 days, 2 nights?
I think that we could do 3 days, 2 nights if we also add in there exceptions that these 3 days and 2 nights cannot include, Memorial Day, 4th of July,
Okay, I'd rather not be that specific, okay? And
Summer
I think,
yeah.
I do think to a degree, I think Mrs. Adams has a point that it seems to be counterintuitive. I think what I would recommend as an alternative is that we limit it to 4 licenses, but if you have multi-day events, you're allowed 2
That's a
in a
good
year.
compromise.
That means all the other ones, you want to have a 1-day event, then have 4. But if you want to have a multi-day event, no more than 2 in a calendar year, and you could even restrict it further, saying they cannot be within 4 months of each other.
or
Well,
consecutive.
not even within 4 months. In any 4-month bracket, you can't have both of them. That means you can't pile them both in the summer, let's say.
Yes, I could support that.
Since we have all these edits, and this will definitely be on our agenda, is everybody comfortable moving on?
Are there,
What?
I mean, we're only
Oh.
halfway through.
Could we maybe table more of our discussion? Because I know there's lots of guests here that want to participate or hear other things.
I don't support that. I think we need to keep
Well,
going.
let's get through with the board first, if we can. And then I don't have many others.
You want to go back to the time? Because I got a response from the police chief via text about disturbing the police. Disturbing.
Don't
Disturbing the police. You're disturbing him.
Just did. I just did disturb the police. Right.
9 o'clock,
Yes.
too late.
10 p.m. to 7 a.m. is.
Okay, so we'll change that to 7.
Hold it. 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. is the no do anything noisy.
So if you change
zone.
6 a.m. to.
Yeah, so we changed that to
Okay.
7.
Yeah.
Got it. Match your steps.
Okay, thank you for.
Thank you, Chief.
And we'll,
Thanks, the chief, for all of
and
it.
we'll
Tell him
call
we won't
that,
disturb the police.
and we're talking about setup and activities? Setup and event activities, or just
I would
event
say,
activities?
I think we should say activities including setup.
Okay.
Yep.
That's
I
fine.
think that's fair. The buffer zone, I only had a question. I always comment that upon submission of a written request supported by documentation, the Board of Selectmen may reduce this distance based on the size and scope of the event. It seems, maybe there's no way to tighten that up,
I mean,
but
there-
it's very nebulous.
Well,
And maybe it has to be.
we
I understand.
talked so much about it, and I think that the breadth of it came from that discussion, and it's essentially the board was concerned about someone coming in and be like, well, I don't want to do the buffer, and just asking here and not having a written request and something that notes why that buffer wouldn't apply. We're having the Whisper Festival, so we don't, doesn't matter if we're 5 feet from the property, those sort of things.
Yep.
And it left a lot of discretion to the board, and I know that that's sort of dangerous ground, and it can be an uncomfortable place, but that was, I think, what the previous board had desired, because these events can be so varied, and the buffer can be so different.
Well, if we include the public hearing process, then I think all this will be, and the butters are
Correct.
notified, they'll have the ability to talk about that.
Okay.
So maybe that's a non-issue. And that's all I had. I don't know if anybody else had other issues they wanted to bring up.
No, I mean, just the only one that stuck out to me was the buffer zone one, as you just mentioned. I was the one for keeping it nebulous because you don't, every event is different, every property is different. So the putting the 100-foot number on it bothered me, because it seemed like you're putting a burden on the person to say that you don't need that. So
Yeah.
But I see both sides of the argument, but I didn't want that to be their cross to bear, to say if I don't have a property that's 210 feet wide, I can't.
Right. Have
a 10-foot event.
A good point. So sure, if your property line doesn't allow to have a 100-foot buffer zone on either side, and you have a party within a 5-foot strip of your land, that's probably not going to work. Yeah.
And also, what if that other person's house, is way far away from their property line?
And I think these are all sort of the justifications that would come from that documentation. Here's a Google image, here's, a surveyed plan, that kind of thing. Here's a letter from the neighbor who says he doesn't care.
Here's a question. I don't know if I somehow missed this in here. So what happens if someone just goes ahead and does it without coming before the Board of Selectmen and just says, I'm just going to do it. I don't care.
Well, there is a violation. If you're in violation of it, in this case, I think in the document, it talks about if you're in violation of the permit. But
Correct.
I think that we should probably add wording that if if it's deemed that you didn't get one, that you may, your ability to get another one may be severely restricted.
So if you disengage in the activity anyway, then we're going to add in language that you'll be restricted for a certain period of time.
And at some point, we've seen that in zoning, there's other agencies that would cross over into those situations, and it would trigger the involvement of zoning and boards that we already have in terms of violations.
Yes and
Board
no.
of Health, et cetera, there'd be other people
Not on a
involved.
Saturday night.
Well,
It probably should.
Depending on what the violation is.
that's exactly it. And zoning has a lot of power, but and a lot of this discussion was had by the planning board during their public hearing for the citizen petition for the new use. It's been discussed here with the Board of Selectmen in regard to the Unifier Festival 2 or 3 years ago. It comes up from time to time. Zoning restricts uses, and uses are not one-time events. They're permanent or semi-permanent activities. So if someone decides to have a rave at their barn on a Saturday night and they don't get a special event permit, and there's kids with glow sticks and pacifiers all over the place, the zoning official is going to go out on Tuesday and say, well, there's nothing here, it's just a barn. It's not a zoning violation because it's not a permanent use. If they do it every weekend, then it becomes something that can be enforced through zoning. Now, depending on what the activity is and what's happening, I mean, the police might have some ability to stop an event, or I don't know that the selectmen's policy allows for fines or other non-criminal disposition. And I think that you get into sort of tenuous ground by introducing that through the policy, whereas, the general bylaws and stuff like that, you have a little bit more power, as I understand it, to do that, and maybe I'm incorrect.
Well, we should at least address it.
Correct.
And
I think
resolution, but we have to make it so that people don't circumvent the rule. Otherwise, what's the point of the rule?
And I think non-permanent events in the violation section makes a lot of sense. I just don't know that there's a lot more teeth beyond that, and I can confer with counsel on that
Let's do that
offline
too,
and
then. I would
see
put
what
that
his
on.
thoughts are.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, I want to make sure that we don't, I feel like we're overcomplicating it because it's intended to be guidelines for people who are coming in. Where we're starting to talk about policing, when people are going to have an event, they do go seeking the answer. And so I just look at it as we're trying to put together what it is called special event permit guidelines. So somebody shows up and says, I want to have a special event, and all the recommendations, like having the checklist, will help have the guidelines. These very unique, potentially rogue events that we're hypothesizing, I think, are taking up a lot of time, and it's not the intent of this policy. There's always going to be rogue things happening outside of any policy, and I think we're going a little too far.
I think it's a point that you're correct. We're looking to guide people who are doing it, but I think also once you guide people doing it, the potential for others to say, oh, well, people can do this, why do I need to go see them? It's at least something that I think is valuable to be on the radar and to at least consider, even if it doesn't make it immediately into the policy, other than, if you perform a non-permitted event, you may be denied in the future. But just the thought and the conversation, I think, adds to some. It's similar to some of the other stuff we've gone around with, and I think it's going to make the policy a little bit easier to use and understand. So
we should
I thank you
encourage
for the
compliance.
conversation.
Right, exactly. Any other comments from the board here?
Yeah, I know Mr. Bernie has put in a lot of time into this. So I really, thank you for your efforts here, and I know there's still more work to do.
There always is.
Are there any more comments from the board? Because I'd like to open it up to the public, if we can.
Just my parting comment for tonight was, I'm really looking forward to how we hone in the definition, because I really feel, I was somewhat intrigued when this came up as potentially being a bylaw discussion at town meeting, because I feel like we shouldn't have a policy and procedure that couldn't pass muster at a town meeting itself. So I feel like we shouldn't present something that we didn't think the whole town would approve of. And unless there's a definition that anyone in town can pick up the guidelines and understand, I don't think it would pass a town meeting bylaw vote. So
I tend to agree with you. Mr. Passios. Don't go too far, Adam.
Now, actually, this question is going to be directly to the board, so Adam's in the clear on this one. Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. As I've sat and listened to the discussion, debate, whatever you want to call it, you guys have just had, one thing that I keyed in on is that sometimes even in the same sentence, you are describing what you're working on here as a policy and/or guidelines. There's a very distinct difference between policies and guidelines, and I really need to be clear from you as a board as to whether you are drafting guidelines or a policy, because there are two very different
I was immediately
things.
going to say policy until I looked down
That's a
and
really
it
good
says
point.
special event permit guidelines. So now,
Exactly.
Now I'm going to say, I believe, and please, people on the board, correct me, I believe it's a policy, and we'll correct the wording.
I agree.
Yes.
However, if we leave it a guideline, then it takes out a lot of people's fears of overreach, and we're truly just working on what it is called, which is...
Well, guidelines
my
wouldn't
understanding
normally
of-
involve permitting.
My understanding of guidelines is it gives you a little bit more flexibility where policy does not. Your concern about unintended circumstances, you have no choice once you set a policy. You have to follow the policy, and you've heard me chastise boards in the past for not following their policies. Whereas if you draft a guideline for this issue, then it allows you some flexibility.
Yeah, but by the same token, I agree with what your point is. The same token is we're trying to be as definitive as possible, and if you make the contraption so loose that you can fit it to whatever you want, then it really doesn't offer even guidelines. It doesn't even offer guidance.
Yeah, okay.
So I just think that we should, get it right, and it should be a policy that's followed, especially one that's involving people spending money and time, because we're going to be asking them to get an umbrella license for insurance in some of these cases, and spend lots of time with the police and fire for public safety, or maybe Board of Health if they're going to have overnights. So I think it should be a policy at that point.
Okay. That's fine. It was just my concern that I was hearing it continuously in the same sentence,
Yes.
being described as one and/or the other. And I think this board should just decide on what it's going to be and call it that.
Yep.
going
And we called it a bylaw too, by the way, so we throw in the third one.
That also. Thank you.
Any other public comment Mr. Weaver.
Steve Weaver, 288 Holman Street. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm going to agree some with Dave and Tom.
All right.
That's exceptional. But I do want to make sure that you are drafting this, and I think you're going to have to keep tweaking it as it goes along anyways, because lawyers, excuse me, Adam, but will look at all kinds of loopholes in your policy, and they'll try to get around it to hold these events. So I think it's going to have to be tweaked as it goes along anyway. Second of all, I think that, the camping, being out in the woods with people next to your property, it's so terrible that I think it should be actually scrapped off of the special events altogether. I like what you did with the violations, but Sundays, as you're holding your events now, Sundays is always a separate day when you're issuing entertainment licenses. And I think Sundays still should be kept separate because it's actually a holy day. And I think that, you should be very, very cautious when you're handing out these events. Just don't hand them out for the sake of handing them out for every Tom, Dick, and Harry that comes up here looking for one across the town. I wouldn't put anybody in this town what we got down on 300 Holman. It's terrible. There are venues in town that hold these events, and I think that there has to be something designated. When does it become a business? And if somebody's getting a special event 3 or 4 times a year, I think all of that has to be taken into consideration. And I like the idea that the abutters are going to have to be notified for all these public events on residential property. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Helen.
Hi. I'm Helen Obermeyer Simmons. I live at 323 Northfield Road, and I was one of the people planning the photo festival that has been canceled. What I would like to just say to everybody is we began planning in February for the event, and a lot of effort went into it, a lot of research, and all for naught now. I do agree with you that people who have private property should be allowed to hold events on their property as long as they follow the rules as would be stated in this policy. Personally, and the reason, Mr. Weaver was the one who spoke 2 times.
Speak to the board,
Mr.
please.
Weaver spoke 2 times against what has been going on at 300 Holman. It is not a business. The events, all of the events that were asked for the special permits, there was no fee charged. It was merely an educational opportunity for guests to come and learn about different issues. And so I just want to go on record as saying, please keep that in consideration.
Thank you. I would say, just so you know, that those events had to be canceled because of a zoning determination, not because of the board and not because
Right.
of licensing from this board. So just, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so we will, Mr. Bernie, I guess we will schedule with you again. I'm wondering if the board think there should be a workshop to do this definition?
Probably.
I'm getting the sense that we probably should make this a workshop.
Or do you want to take a swing at it first?
Well,
Policy.
I think it could be both. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, you could.
I think it would be unproductive for us to all sit around and try and workshop something out, but I think if I present you with something with the intent that we're going to sit down and pull it apart and rebuild it, that makes the conversation happen a little bit easier.
I think taking a stab at it would be good. I don't think that a group of 5 people wordsmithing one part of the document, just the definition, because if we were going to formulate the whole thing, I would agree with you. I think if we focus on one thing and we can come up with that, it sounds like we would have an agreement on the board.
Sure.
So I think we should schedule that for our July workshop.
Okay, when in July?
The second.
The second, so that's in the teens.
Is it the 16th?
Second Tuesday.
Well, we have to discuss our July and August schedule tonight.
To be determined.
Yep,
But
so
that's, I'm,
either the 9th or the 16th.
yeah. I think
I'm not going to
around
be available
both
on
of
the
those times.
16th. I know that.
So I should be available.
Okay.
Thank you much.
I will work out that with the town manager. And
Yeah, and just let me know.
Okay.
You know where to find me.
You got it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Adam.
Okay. Interviews, appointments, reappointments, resignations. Madam Town Manager.
Yes. In your packet, there are multiple appointments for the seasonal beach coordinator position, as well as a number of seasonal lifeguards, and I can read those.
Sure.
Genevieve Nass, that's the seasonal beach coordinator. Elizabeth Simeone, seasonal lifeguard. Catherine Kiefer, seasonal lifeguard. Cheryl Shaw, seasonal lifeguard. Lynn Major, seasonal lifeguard. Ethan Gengler, seasonal lifeguard. Paige Gengler, seasonal lifeguard. And Jared Bowser as a seasonal lifeguard. And I'm asking you to ratify these appointments tonight.
I move we ratify the town manager's appointments of the beach coordinator and seasonal lifeguards as read.
I would second that.
Any discussion?
Sure. I would also make discussion just saying, having been a member of the town beach for many years, and many of these people serving there, they do an excellent job with swim lessons, create a great environment. I would encourage parents to look into joining the beach and doing the swim lessons, and thank, I know it's not a high-paying job, and so thank everybody who works there for all they've done in the years past.
Totally agree. And I think that you can get a beach
Yes.
license now, right? Or
June 3rd, they were available online through the new e-permitting software.
You have to pay, I've heard.
You
You have
what?
to pay a fee to pay.
There's a technology
There's been a
fees
little
on
bit of a
all
ruckus.
these.
Mr. Bernie.
You don't have to pay.
Okay.
The technology fee is what the board approved back. And if you pay online, there's a fee for using the payment company that our vendor uses to pay online. You can bring a check over to Samantha at the DPW and hand her a check, and that is
No longer the town clerk. It's not done
it's
downstairs
not through the town
anymore.
clerk, it's now through the DPW, and I believe that information was posted both on Facebook and the park's webpage in the instructions on how to apply for the beach pass.
Can we put up a sign where people used to go, like an old-fashioned sign by the clerk's office for people who wander in to do it? Because all my life, there's been a certain way we've done it, and if you're not into technology,
If this is the first year it's being done, I would agree that
Yeah.
you should.
And I think there was some discussion, I don't know if it's come to fruition or not, about perhaps a terminal being put in for them to do the permits.
That was just a
Suggestion. Okay.
And it should be reiterated what Mr. Bernie said. So anything that's paid online to the town, I think this is not just this permit, there are other things
Yes.
that like if you go to a store, the person accepting that payment, whether it's credit card or PayPal, there's a fee that clearance company charges the town. So the town shouldn't get less money because we're providing the convenience of electronic payment. The town does not make more money.
No.
They're just covering that fee that we're
Correct.
being charged.
And I believe it's $2.87
Right.
on the beach permits. And I believe the same fee, a similar fee applies for taxes paid with credit cards and things like that.
Yep.
But not,
I think excise fee.
correct,
Vehicle excise fee is the
correct.
same
If you pay
thing.
through Kelly and Ryan, you get hit for that too. So.
Okay, but you can buy them in person at the DPW, because that's very different than it's always been. Is that correct? If you want to go
you
get.
can do them online and you can pay at the DPW. So you can do the sign up at your convenience. So when you go to the DPW, all you have to do is say, my permit number is.
So does everybody have to sign up online then?
Sure.
It's just
That-
different, so
that
I'm
I
just looking for
don't.
clarification.
There's been some discussion, and I don't want to speak
'Cause
for the
it's like
Parks
Beach
Commission.
Pass season,
So
and
I will.
we're not.
I don't know if they're offering paper permits. or
Heather,
not.
do you know the process to get beach passes where we can just concretely explain it since it's changed?
I've been working with the Parks Commission on that, and that was supposed to be hammered out. You know, we should have something shortly as far as filling out the form online. That's the last I knew, is that you can fill out the form online and bring a check to the DPW to pay. But I will put something up as soon as I hear from.
So the only fee is if you are paying online, because
The only extra fee.
Extra fee.
Right.
What is the price of a beach pass? $63?
$63
Per
would be-
family?
Yes, for a family.
Yep.
Is there an individual charge?
There is I just bought my family pass.
Don't you want to go as an individual?
Right. So this will all be posted when we, to clarify these, right, when you find out?
It's already up on the website, all the fees, and is on the town Facebook page. It's been sent to the Ledger, the Lunenburg Mass page, and the town beach page.
Okay. Okay, we're going to pass over the town manager's report and take it out of order here because I know people want to participate in some of these. So the first thing is the payment in lieu of taxes discussion. We have been contacted, the town manager has been contacted by the solar company, and that has been postponed to a date not yet specified in the future. So that is being tabled until they come back and contact us.
You know, I had one question on that. I looked at the years, the table of the charges, it wasn't clear to me whether or not that was the same as the taxes that were replaced.
Yeah, I noticed that too. In the packet, there wasn't a side-by-side. It was
Right.
a projection of what the pilot is, but it wasn't a projection of the alternative, which is what.
And we can
Ms. Luck asked.
discuss, when we do have this meeting, we will have our regional tax assessor or his representative here to explain that to us.
But it'd
we
be
will-
nice to have it.
No,
laid out.
I agree. But what I'm saying is that it's not progressing and we have time to get that. I want to see it as well.
Great.
Discussion of process of annual appointments made by the Board of Selectmen. This was asked to be on the agenda from our last meeting.
Yes.
I will open up the discussion. Up until now, I'll just start out by a foundation. Up until now, my understanding is that the reappointment process would be as follows, that if you are on a appointed board, commission, or committee, and you want to be reappointed, you would fill out a reappointment form that you would submit in a timely fashion before we do the reappointments, which will be at the end of June. Explaining, there's a few questions on there, how have you been able to contribute to the board, committee, or commission? Suggestions for making things better, suggestions for things that are going well, et cetera. And then it was, I don't believe mandatory, I believe it was voluntary that you could come at the reappointment time and speak to the board who would be in receipt of your reappointment, and then the board would make a decision to reappoint or not. That is my understanding of what the procedure has been. So, I understand there were people who want to revisit or discuss maybe ways to modify or change that. And I will open it up to the board.
Yeah, I think
Mr. McQuaid.
I think my concern was that, or my suggestion was that all of the positions that are up, in June, July, just be advertised, not as vacancies, but put out there that they are in fact up for reappointment, so that this would be, again, for next year's process, because we're kind of too late now. Be advertised earlier in the year, several months before, so we can solicit talent bank forms just to see if there's anyone interested in those positions. And again, I think just some better public awareness of these positions come up for reappointment. So even if there are members of the public who have complaints about appointed members of boards, they know that this meeting's going to happen where they can show up and speak to it. So, because I don't think that mechanism exists now.
Okay.
I totally agree with what Damon just said. And one of the things I asked for when we talked about this last week was, has anybody submitted interest? And we have a thing here of talent bank forms on file as of June 4th, 2019. And I read through them, and there's people who have shown interest or put a talent bank form in for joining Conservation Commission, Cultural Council, etc. And some of them say no opening at the time. So if that was their answer when they applied, well, then technically there is an opening every time there's a reappointment. And if we have people waiting in the wings for interest, and there's an appointment, I think there should be a process where these people can also interview or express interest in having that position. Even though it was an elected position, we went through an appointment process for planning board, Michael and I, because we were both interested in being appointed for the same position. And it was a couple nights of interviews, and it was quite extensive. Who are we going to choose to appoint? I think we can have a small version of that set up to take place every year, so that if we have somebody interested, somebody already serving, we have a process where there's room for people to join and to change a committee, rather than to have somebody have the feeling that they can keep it,
But we have had that. That has been the process. People haven't come forward, but
Well,
when
we
people
have-
have come forward, a different person has been appointed.
I guess my point is strictly that we have talent bank form people who have submitted interest, and we're not bringing them in. So that's how we started our process, with a talent bank form.
Correct.
There was 2 of them. That brought us both into the situation. If we have somebody currently there and a talent bank form, or 3 talent bank forms, we have to honor the fact that somebody has shown interest in the appointment, and they deserve our consideration.
I think there has, as Ms. Luck indicated, I've seen occasions where when there's 2 people that are going for a position, that there has been somewhat of a process similar to what Selectman Adams and I went through when we were going for the planning board. But I think that what Selectman McQuaid and Selectman Adams are saying, which I also agree with, is that when these positions come up for renewal, that it should be treated, yes, there are people who are applying for reappointment, but it should be treated as open for the community to know that it's happening, know
Yes.
that they're eligible to someone apply or put in a talent bank form, and that then would trigger a process for us to decide, or whomever's on this board to decide who to appoint. And I think the current process now, it's kind of like whoever's there, they want to stay there, they're kind of getting reappointed, and then anyone else out there in the community who might want to join, they're kind of, up until someone says, I don't want to do this anymore, there really isn't much of an opportunity for them.
Well, I think there should also be a request made for a recommendation from the board.
I think we
That's
do
it.
ask for that.
That is part of the
That is part of the
process.
process.
Oh, okay, it's not listed in the reappointment process.
Yeah.
That is part of the process. Elaine sends the talent bank form to the committee with the vacancy, asks for their recommendation. to
Are
bring
you
to
talking
the
about
board.
vacancy? I think they're talking about reappointment.
Reappointment?
It's number 4.
But I think that we asked them, because I know Council on Aging is having
But,
that.
well, this says reappointment talent bank forms are sent to chair of committee to provide feedback from
Right.
members being reappointed. So that's just feedback from the people being reappointed.
I think it's poorly worded. I think it's about members being reappointed. So.
Well, that's not what it says.
I know, I agree with you. I
Because-
agree that's not what it
because there's
says, which
also
is
the-
why words are important.
Because the reappointment talent bank form does ask them to does ask the members to write.
Okay, so can we clarify that? Because
I think it's another step.
Yeah, it should be that we want to get feedback from the board that they're on.
Exactly.
Right.
And
So that would be like 5, request recommendation from the pertinent boards.
Okay, for reappointment.
Right.
Okay, so that, you're correct, that is not done currently.
I know some boards already
It's
do
just
it.
for
I know
vacancies.
Council on Aging is doing it.
Yeah.
So since, like Damon said, a lot of this needs to be done sooner than we have now, our deadline would be to reappoint by the end of June, correct?
The June 18th
And
meeting.
so then, just as a modification of not being able to completely change it, if we have a talent bank form currently for any of the positions are up, I think it would be fair on that night to allow the people who have submitted talent bank forms to present themselves to us with
They
their
always
interests.
are.
No,
not for
Not
the
for-
reappointments.
those are for
That's for
vacancies.
vacancies.
This is reappointments.
So this is
But
the yearly
if-
reappointment.
If it has happened before that people were up for reappointment.
Not that I'm aware.
We just read through them and say like, aye.
When Tom
Everything.
Bertram was appointed, that's what happened.
Well, then it happened once.
And it should
Okay,
happen
well,
every
yeah.
time then. But
And by the way, when that happened, the rest of the Conservation Commission quit. So-
Yes, I
But
understand
Mr.
that.
Chair and Heather, could
Which
would
I'll
you-
bring up in a second.
And just
Fill out his reappointment form.
Right.
So that's what caused the open there,
Right.
because he did not complete
Right.
the form that said, yes, I want to be reappointed.
And just for further confusion, the only, so we have 7 talent bank forms.
Okay.
For people looking to be appointed to certain committees. Only 3 are up for reappointment for the committee that they're seeking, and that happens to be conservation. 3 people are looking to be appointed to conservation. The rest of the committees are all full and not up for reappointment
Okay.
for those being.
Well, then I think those people who have put in a talent bank form, since it is going up for reappointment, deserve the opportunity to be considered for appointment. And I think that would be how we make the process fair, like how Damon started off, to have a process in an advertisement that, because we have to go through an election, which is our reappointment. But all positions deserve some sort of attention for the opportunity for other people to engage.
So
I agree.
I'm going to play devil's advocate on both sides because I really don't know which side I come out on this, and it's not very often that I feel myself in this position. But on the one side, I agree 100% with what everybody said here, that if we have people willing to serve, it would be good to engage them and allow them the opportunity to serve the community. But the flip side of that is 2 things. If somebody that you're looking to not reappoint, if you're going to make this a competition, the first question I would have is, for instance, Conservation Commission, only because town manager used that as an example. What is the expertise on this board to select one person over another, unless there are actual complaints or problems with their attendance or problems with their decision-making or their behavior or anything like that? If, barring any of those, what expertise do we have in that area that would make me choose this person over that person? And that's a problem, I think.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think the expertise is the interviewing process. I think we're here to gather information from the candidates and they bring their resume or ideas. Well, we went through a really great example of this. And so what we did was we presented our argument for why we both were seeking the appointment. And so I think the interview becomes the opportunity for us to learn about candidates. And then you said you didn't want to create a competition, but I think what we're creating is opportunity, an opportunity for other people to engage. I don't think people should be grandfathered into positions that other people can't have access to.
So I don't disagree with what you said. I agree. I just think that the flip side is equally strong, because if I could, reiterate what one of our public comment people said, some people interview well because they interview often, right? Thank you, Steve, for that. I appreciate it. But I mean, that's true. I mean, and so some people are comfortable at this podium talking to people when they know they're on TV, and some people aren't. And I don't know that definitely that in any way reveals how they would perform as a member of whatever body they're being appointed to. The difference between what you and Mr. Jeffries went through, because that was a vacancy for an appointment, which is eventually you have to choose somebody. So just by definition, it could be a competition. And again, I don't know which way it turn out. I see both sides, and I'm willing to try it, but we have a tough time filling positions sometimes, and to knock somebody out in place of somebody else who didn't do anything wrong, it has the potential, at least the potential, of disconnecting somebody from serving again. Because they're like, why was I removed? I don't know why I was removed.
And I agree with that. And I think to me anyway, there would be a burden it'd be tough for somebody to convince me that the incumbent shouldn't stay on, provided they've done a good job and there's no complaints. But I still think we should be the opportunity for people to raise a concern or have a discussion to begin with, because that just doesn't happen now. I think we approved them all as a group last year. We didn't even read off the names individually. It just happened. So there was, and it wasn't, the town people weren't made aware that these positions were up or that there was anything even going to happen except for it's the annual appointments. So nobody knew, hey, if I have a concern, come in and say I have a concern.
To note in advance that things are going to be up for reappointment, I think we should do regardless of whether we interview people or not, by the way. I agree that we want to give people the opportunity to say these people are coming up, so that if anybody does have good things, positive or negative things to say about those people, would be a good time. So I agree 100% with that part.
I think it's also about, the appearance of a good old boy system. And that, I think that there are many people in town who don't participate. And, speaking to, and I'll use my father as an example, my late father. My father never came to any town meetings. He lived in this town for like 27 years. He wanted to come here, but because of the stairs for a meeting, he chose not to. And I think there was, I don't remember what the issue was that he wanted to come here for, but he had this impression that it was a good old boy system here in Lunenburg, that when you see someone on the select board that's also on the Conservation Commission, or someone on this board that's also on that board, or this person's, dating this person, and I think it all starts to look like, how do I get a fair shot in here? And so I think that, we have to avoid the appearance of that, and I think the only way we can do that is by saying, yes, that we will take a fair look. And then also, I want to point out that, although Katie and I are both, and Damon, are all elected officials, and certainly we're sitting here because of election, but I think there's no doubt that since, Damon came onto this board, that was a change in the way that business was done. And that when Selectman Adams came on the board, that also was another change in how things were done. And I hope that in my contribution would be similar, that having new faces with new thoughts who maybe aren't entrenched into how things have always been done, that I think that creates an opportunity for us to move in a different direction.
So for the sake of making impact on improving our process, since we've only identified one place, I would like to make a motion that when we do our reappointment, we invite the and they may not want to come. I mean, these are people who have expressed interest, but we invite them to attend and participate in the reappointment process, those who have submitted a talent bank form.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I'd make sure that the person who sits in that seat up for reappointment knows that there's other people who've expressed interest in it, and they should be.
Okay, so I would ask,
too.
Can we have Elaine please contact the people in the talent bank form, and if any, or if at least one or more than one say they're interested, then we should alert the people up for reappointment, and the chair of their committee.
I agree with the motion, and I support it. I have a question for you, Ms. Adams, to see if you'd be willing to amend it to allow for a written response rather than an in-person appearance. To be able, one of the things that stands out to me at town meeting is that there's a lot of people there and like 10 people talk. And, and people may have opinions, but they just don't feel necessarily like they are good at standing up in front of people and expressing it. So, have another option.
Just invite them to participate in, it doesn't have to be a in person, but invite them to be considered for reappointment or considered for the appointment of the yeah, let's start that. I can reword it because I understand what you're saying, that it doesn't require for people to go through what we went through was a little arduous. And only people like us would would have gone through that process. So I would like to make a motion, then I'll amend it, that we just alert those who have given a talent bank form for positions that we are currently doing a reappointment for, that there is, an opening upon us for the appointment of a position in which they can participate. And I mean, I will leave it up for how we do vacancies, I think should resemble how we do this.
Well, okay, so it's interesting you bring up that point, because how we fill vacancies is you have to appear before the board.
Right, and that's why as I speak, I think, well, what is the other process? And I think if you want to engage, then you have to give something.
And as I asked you, the hypothetical question is, why would you choose somebody over another? I believe the answer was, well, you would get them from the interview. Well, if we don't have an interview, then how?
So then I would keep that we invite them to participate in an interview. Thank you.
I think it would be more fair to them.
I think it's more fair to everybody.
And I think they'd want to if they really want it. So
Right.
I'll leave it how it was. Sorry.
Could I ask the board to consider, could we kind of widen this scope? Because we have other vacancies on other boards. How about also ask them, during that process, explain the other openings, if they're willing to serve on another board that may be similar, like such as Agricultural Commission.
I think we could do that as a separate process if we have people who've shown interest, some sort of blanket email to the group that says, hey, you've shown some interest. Here's everything you could potentially do. I think that's a good recommendation.
And I can't speak for the last 2 years, but that is exactly what happened in every other appointment process that had competition. So we always ask people who were not selected if they were interested in other things. So we should always be doing that. So yes, I'm for that.
Right. Thank you.
Can we, there seems to be some interest in adding to the conversation.
Yes, I noticed that myself. So I will ask. Mr. Weaver, I saw you first. I'll let you next, man.
I was just wondering how...
Just after Mr. Weaver. Yep, that's okay. We're very popular tonight.
Unfortunately. Steve Weaver, 288 Holman Street. Maybe if you have a bunch of applicants that you consider some type of citizen participation on the board, such as an intern or something.
Yeah, that's
and
a
that
great
way
idea.
then you can build a ladder of people that are gaining experience, but they're not voting, but they're learning, like a cadet.
We have some members, like the ZBA has associate members.
Yeah, and
It's a great
that
idea.
would be a way to introduce them into the fire, and give them a little experience of it at the same time, with some of the people that you have in the backlog.
Now, how do you do that? Do you have to change bylaws?
Right.
Right, so we would have to change the bylaws, and if somebody really wanted to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would say that there's nothing preclude, they're all open meetings, so except executive sessions, and most bodies, except for this board and the school committee, don't have executive sessions for the most part. They could just go to the meeting.
It's a good point. I sort of did that for a little over a year as a
I did the same
selectman.
thing
back
before I
there.
got on the board. I mean, you could just go to the meetings. You don't have to be, the ZBA has associate members because they have deadlines and they need to be able to fill in somebody because of the tight deadlines by state statute. So that's why we have associates, to be ready to fill in because there are statutory requirements. But, other ones, you could just go.
So now, if you had to change a bylaw, would you have to change it for each committee or board individually, or could you blanket it?
Yeah, and some committees and commissions are established by Mass General law as far as the numbers, so we'd have to look at each one.
Right. And it would be arduous. I think you could learn, again, just by going.
Yes, right.
So,
But you wouldn't have the title.
ma'am. Absolutely.
Sally Kotz, 5 Spring Street, Lunenburg. How do you notify people that there are appointments or there's openings on these various committees?
I can't speak
They're
unless-
advertised in the paper. When there's a vacancy, we advertise the positions in the paper.
Another thought I had was, you know, the little, where they always say the hazardous waste day or something like that. You know, if you could put, you know, I don't know how many appointments are each year.
Yeah, a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking that if there was just a couple, you could say, you know, if you're interested or something like that, or openings in X, Y, and Z committees, you might get more people, you know, a greater awareness, and people might be more interested.
But
Well, one
it's
of the-
a great point, because we don't advertise reappointments. We don't do it on Facebook or the paper or anything. So
Yeah.
a
And a lot of people
vacancy
don't
is
get
more of a
papers
random.
anymore, and, you know,
Well, getting word to people is always a problem.
We could
Right,
try
but
our
that little-
website.
but that little, if that had enough room, that seems to be, everybody's driving by.
Well, one of the things I'd like to do, I'd like to reinstitute when I was on the board at some point, you know, as chair, I'd like to reinstitute that at least once a month, that this meeting, maybe our first meeting of the month, that we would have a list of vacancies, so people who are interested would know that there are vacancies.
Yeah, okay, that was just
But
my
if the
thought.
appointments happen at like one time of the year mostly, it sounds like that may be a good idea to say, hey, you know, if you're interested in volunteering in town, you know, stop by town hall, fill out talent bank form.
Yeah.
Yeah, on that,
announce it at
on that
town
little
meeting.
thing, on that little thing at the Ritter, you could put, you know, go to the website, check out the reappointments or something, you know.
And vacancies are on the website, just to add that. Like the
Great.
ZBA one is up now.
Sadly.
You want me to pick somebody, or you can pick amongst yourselves? You're both going to get a chance to speak, so.
Ashley Braun again, 607 Reservoir. Suggestion, because I don't know a lot about the appointments or even volunteering for different committees or opportunities that are out there, but would be helpful for someone like me that doesn't know a lot about this, would if what you were looking for in a committee member, if you were able to post on your Facebook or on the website or in whatever venue, you know, different things that you were, like for conservation, if you're a biologist, if you're an architect, if you have any of these skills, if, you know, those types of things would be helpful. You know, some people are just genuinely interested and they're willing to learn, and that's wonderful too. But more descriptive things about what you would be looking for and what you'd be seeking out, I think would be really helpful.
Sure.
And I agree, communication is absolutely key. I like what you guys were saying about, you know, opening the talent pool. If there's talent out there, if there are volunteers that are willing, I think giving everybody a fair shot and just seeing what they have to offer to the town and these committees is a great opportunity and a great advantage for this town. Thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
We haven't eaten supper yet, so I might get a little hangry. I want
We'll
to
respond accordingly.
Thank you. Please, come right back. I want to say a couple of things. I think that's a great initiative. On conservation, or any board, if you sometimes see that there's 3 or 4 talent banks for that one committee and not others, that's sometimes a red flag that there's an issue and people want to join that because something's going on within that mix. Secondly, I want to say the conservation group, and 2 of them are here this evening, Todd and Bob Peace, are very patient. I'm not here complaining about conservation as a whole. And third, Mr. Luck was put on conservation because at that time, he already sits on sewer, and at that time, there was no one on conservation, there was no talent bank waiting list, and he volunteered to go on, and that was the purpose for him to go on. So I think where there's so many volunteers, and we have these gentlemen that are on one committee, it might be great to even look at Mr. Luck's appointment and be able to move those people in and be able to keep these wonderful gentlemen. And I say that because they don't agree. I'm in front of you because all conservation said no to my order of conditions. So don't think that I like these 3 and don't like someone else because they said no. So it's not that they, stick up for Juliana, and that's why I want them on there. But they're patient, they're open-minded, they listen, and they understand the value of people that actually go to college and get degrees and then actually get jobs in those fields and come and tell you what you need to do because they have that education, not people that sit in a room and say, no, I'm as smart as you are, and then think they want to come work in Lunenburg again. So that's the difficulty. And I think it's wonderful that those gentlemen do that, and that's why I admire them. I think, as I said earlier, they're as frustrated as us because they've just spent 8 months working till 11 o'clock at night when they have families over the Lake Shirley order of conditions. So it's as stressful for them as it is for Lake Shirley. And I just wanted that reiterated because I value them very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I'd like to take the opportunity to think, I think we have, for the most part, we have great volunteers.
I do.
In
I
so
don't
many
want
places.
them to think it all. I'm
As
not.
to the qualifications, I will say one thing. I think it's important, and if we don't already have it, we should make a description, first of all, of what each board does and what jurisdiction they have. I think that's a part, is there? Okay, so
on
that's
the town
good.
website.
Okay, I thought I remembered it being, but I didn't want to say that definitively. So, but as far as, it would be interesting to say that, well, again, just because we're choosing conservation, that if you had a biology degree and everything, that these would be great. And maybe that in some cases you wouldn't want a conservation commission that was devoid of that. But I also wouldn't want a full board that had that. And sometimes we want to have just, regular citizens. I want somebody who just cares about and comes at it from a completely different point of view. There's a lot to learn. Planning board is a lot to learn. A lot of committees and departments, finance committee is a lot to learn. So, but we don't want finance committee when everybody's an accountant or a financial advisor either, because it would be, it just wouldn't give the diverse set of opinions that I think the board would be looking for. But people should know at least what they do.
Right.
Yeah. And the Talent Bank Forum has just a 1-2 sentence thing for each board as well. So it gives you a quick synopsis, but there is a description of the duties and the Mass General law that pertains to each board as well.
And for people listening to this live now or playing this on YouTube later on, I would say if you're interested, all the boards have public meetings. Go to one of the meetings, see what they do. There is no substitute than that to see what the boards do and what it's like to be on them.
And most of them are filmed, so you could see them on YouTube.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, you don't even have to go to the meetings. You can watch them.
That's
We're
the
not
next
advocating
question.
that,
Thank you,
then.
Mrs. Luck. People, because we have the audio from the Conservation Commission, and people are saying that you can only have so many views, so people aren't able to hear it because it reached its views.
Use the mic.
It reached its views for the day. So I guess only so many people can actually hear it or listen to it, and then it stops. 3 people emailed me. Ms. Braun was one of them today that got a notification that said, sorry, too many people have already viewed it, try in 24 hours.
Is that from YouTube?
The video, the meeting.
Audio recording?
The audio.
Yeah, we have to look at that because we need to make sure that that's available.
Yeah, so so people, I guess must hit a limit of how many
Yeah, it depends. I'm
it
sure
can
they have
get in a
different.
day.
Yeah, different.
So they're getting that kickback.
So are those meetings not taped for YouTube then?
No.
Well, not all of them are televised.
Every other one is televised.
I've always
Televised
asked
the
that
ones
they
that
all
are
be
here?
televised.
Maybe we can
because
improve that process by seeing if public access cable would just tape all the meetings?
Well, we can certainly ask them, but in the interim, if they are being recorded, there's no reason why the YouTube channel for PAC can't house the recording, I'm guessing. I mean, it won't have video, but we should look at that if they would house just the recordings.
I can actually read you.
Excuse me?
I can read you the error message that I got today if you'd like. It said, sorry you can't view or download this file at this time. Too many users have viewed or downloaded this file recently. Please try accessing the file again later. If the file you are trying to access is particularly large or is shared with many people, it may take up to 24 hours to be able to view or download this file. If you can't access the file after 24 hours, contact your domain administrator.
We should look into what that policy is. They should be available all the time. Any other people on the appointments and reappointments?
I just want to make one more comment.
Absolutely.
Todd Dwyer, 361 Mopus Road. I'm also a member of the Conservation Commission, and I'm up for reappointment, incidentally. I just want to encourage the board that if there are boards like the Conservation Commission that has a number of reappointments and interest in joining the board, you're the town's representatives. So I think it makes sense, rather than rubber stamp it, you lend your opinion and evaluate the boards, and don't be afraid to shake them up. I mean, that's your job. The worst case is, I get back a Saturday and every other Saturday and Wednesday. So.
Is this subliminal? Is this subliminal right now?
That's just what I want to say. And thank you.
Thanks.
you. No, thank you. And
All
I
right.
think if it's okay to join in, by having this discussion, it's certainly not directed at any specific reappointment that's about to come up. When I tried to get involved, just from my personal experience, when I tried to cross over, there was a lot of boundaries and hurdles where it felt like it was hard to participate or hard to be allowed to participate. So I think building in areas of awareness are good. And then if you're good at what you're doing and we want you to be there on a Saturday morning, which I just experienced, then I mean, I think the reappointments will happen as you would, hopefully interpret. But yes, I asked, I had some trees looked at, and I said, do you guys do this every Saturday? No, every other. And then I'm still thinking, they come out to sites every other Saturday in addition to their meetings. So the commitments that everybody puts in on these boards and committees, it's not to casually suggest that it's unimportant, because that's a huge commitment.
And be persistent, by the way.
But I'm not just being nice because I'm going to be there tomorrow.
I was rejected for the first 3 roles that I put myself up for, 3 committees, so it took the 4th one to get on anything, so it's
And what was the committee that you got on?
FinCom eventually. Right. So, okay, we have a motion
Yes.
to invite or use the talent bank forms that we have for the Conservation Commission, since those are the only ones that overlap with reappointments, that the Office of the Executive Assistant is going to contact them and notify them if they're interested and ask them to come up, and we would interview them and change that process for this year and presumably going forward. So, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you, everyone, for your input on that. Town manager report.
Okay. Just 1 second.
Sorry, I didn't mean to surprise you.
Was out of order.
All right, just 2 announcements. The Arts Festival is Saturday, June 8th, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., Memorial Drive. And Cruise Night is Wednesday, June 12th, 4 to 8 p.m. on Memorial Drive as well. As a follow-up to a request by the board to address the dangerous intersection at Electric Ave and Route 2A, the police chief sent a letter on May 24th to Mass DOT requesting a review to see if left turn arrows can be provided. Montechusett Regional Planning Commission is able to assist with the crash data study for this.
Thank you.
To the police chief. Update on 925 Mass Ave. At our last meeting, a resident had brought up 925 Mass Ave and that the town should focus on doing something about this property. I have periodically updated the board about this property, and that I've been working with town staff and various agencies since 2017 to see how we can clean up this property without the liability of cleanup costs of this old gas station. I've worked with town council, met with Montechusett Regional Planning Commission about possible brownfield funds, and with Mass Development. In order to perform the required Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental assessment of this property, the town needed to gain a right of entry that would be granted during the process of the tax taking. Our tax attorney filed a title report with Land Court in February, and his office was recently notified that a motion to amend the petition for tax taking had to be filed because the original petition had registered at instead of recorded at. The title report identifies all parties with legal interest in the subject property that would be wiped out if the town were to foreclose on the property. This is an ongoing, complicated project, and I will continue to update the board as it progresses. The walkability and parking study through MRPC. The public meeting on, as Chairman Alonso referred to, the public meeting on the walkability and parking study was held Saturday, June 1st at 1 p.m. and Montechusett Regional Planning Principal Planner Sherry Bean facilitated the meeting and sought input on the positive and negative aspects of affecting pedestrian travel, ways to increase safety and accessibility for pedestrians, and also looked at parking. Approximately 25 people attended the meeting, which I see as a success for a public meeting on a Saturday. And Sherry received lots of great input that will be included in our final report. I understand there was a lot of interest in doing another downtown area walk as well as one in Whalum. And I spoke with Sherry today, and she indicated she didn't think there was enough in the budget for her to attend another public audit, but if the town performed this, it could be included in our final report, which will also include recommendations and possible funding sources for projects. Anyone interested in submitting written comments on Main Street and Whalum Park areas are welcome to submit those in email to myself or Sherry Bean. And as a follow-up, because there was so much interest, I will again ask Sherry if we can do a walking audit of the Whalum area.
And because Adam was instrumental in leading the second tour on that, can we ask him if he would be willing to do another one in Town Center that didn't involve MRPC, but he knows the forms that they used, and that would be good to have another one here, because I know a lot of people indicated they couldn't make it.
Okay.
I think members of the select board would be interested in going on that too.
Yes. Is this, out of curiosity, it's to the town manager. Is this, I know that the schools have a walking kind of distance. If you live so close, you walk. Is this has this looked at the sidewalks that would, that area for all the kids who have to walk to school?
Yes.
And sidewalks for them? Okay.
Yep, and actually, I want to add that Sherry told me today that because of this, so there was a Safe Routes to School coordinator there on Saturday. All the schools are now signed up.
Oh,
for the
great.
Safe Routes to School program. So that now makes them eligible for construction funds for projects along those routes.
If I could
which is
add,
another resource for projects.
if I can add, one of the things that was discussed on the route that was a little bit outside of the scope of what they wanted, but if you go on the sidewalk past the library and then you cross over into where the entrance is to Passios and then connects to the back lot. So the sidewalk doesn't start for like 300, 200 feet down the road. And we talked about, well, that doesn't make sense. We need to have one there. And that's when it was brought to our attention that the schools have their own program that we can use as apart from the town. There are different avenues of grants and monies that we can try to get to, and the safe route was one of them. So we did identify some of the school property.
Great.
As a follow-up to a question that was asked at the last Selectmen's meeting about whether the completion date for the Summer Street Road reconstruction project has changed, I contacted Mass DOT, and the official completion date for the Summer Street project has not changed from the original date of May of 2020. Mass DOT anticipates that most of the work will be done in the timeframe of November, December, and expect that the contractor will do the finished landscaping and punch item lists in the spring of 2020. Due to the short time frame to make any necessary changes to their waste hauler regulations and the due date of June 12th for the Mass DEP Education and Enforcement Coordinator Grant, the Board of Health has decided not rush to make any changes and will review their regulations between now and the next year's grant application.
So does that mean we won't be able to get that person this year? Right?
That position, right, but through the Recycling IQ grant, we'll be able to hire for the curbside checks. So that's type of enforcement position. This would have been an added role, but they did seem like they were agreeable to proceeding and reviewing them. So I hope that next year we can apply for the same position.
Great.
At the last Selectmen's meeting, I reported on our electricity and gas rate changes that were secured through our energy broker that go into effect on December 1st, 2019. A question was asked about what the current rates were. Our current electricity supply rate is 0.08818, and it is changing to 0.09425 on December 1st, 2019. And the gas supply rate is currently $5.77 .774 and will change to $5.19 on December 1st, 2019. The projected effect on the fiscal 20 budget is approximately $300 more than the current year. But if we've had a lot of energy efficiency projects due to the Green Communities Grant, so I see this as a positive result on our electricity accounts for next year.
Do you know how many kilowatts we use?
I'd have to look that number up. Yeah.
I would have been absolutely shocked if you knew that number right now.
I know how many kilowatts I use. I
We
keep
have
track
lots
of that stuff.
Lots of accounts. Update on community solar projects through NextAmp. As a result of the public information sessions about NextAmp's community solar program that offers residents discounted electricity from community solar projects in Lunenburg and Fitchburg, more than 250 residents are enrolled in the community solar program. This program is currently full, and there is a waiting list in the event residents that are currently enrolled decide to opt out of the program. I've been working with NextAmp on enrolling all the applicable town, sewer, and school accounts that are able to receive net metering credits, and the timing of receiving these discounts will be the same as the community solar program that residents are signed up for. The exact date that credits will be seen on bills will depend on the individual billing cycles. NextAmp informed me yesterday that the timing of the discounted electricity for residents and the town accounts will be in the January to March timeframe. Earmark for the Eagle House. As I reported at the last Selectmen's meeting, I was contacted by the Department of Housing and Community Development about an earmark in the fiscal 19 state budget that was evidently included, but we were just made aware that we received it, and it needs to be spent by June 30th. I spoke with DHCD again yesterday, and due to the wording of the earmark that not less than $25,000 shall be expended on the Lunenburg Eagle House Senior Community Center, end quotes, it does not link it to a specific project at the Eagle House, and we are able to submit expenditures dating back to July 28, 2018 until June 30th, 2019, up to $25,000 for reimbursement. I've asked the finance director and DPW administrative assistant provide me with a list of and copies of invoices to submit that will be as part of the required documentation to the state in order to receive the reimbursement. Unfortunately, due to the timing of when we were notified, there is insufficient time to put together specifications and put out to bid and complete the work by June 30th for the HVAC project. The good news is that we will be able to submit for reimbursement for the fiscal 19 Eagle House expenditures, and this will positively affect our free cash that will be certified in the fall.
Can we take that 25,000 and expend it on what we wanted to?
That's what
that we'll get.
So any expenditures since July 28th of 2018 to June 30th, we can use.
And so that, do you think that'll be 25,000?
Oh, well, we should have.
So then can you take that
the
25 and
utility-
put it into the next, this targeted purchase?
Via appropriation next year. Wouldn't
Right.
a special town
Right,
meeting.
it would be fall to free cash.
Right.
And then
Do you know what happened, why we didn't get notified?
I can't.
Oh.
The answer is no.
Yeah.
Okay.
The answer-
We both inquired under parallel channels to our representatives and senator, and at first we were told it was a bond bill that got released, and then we're like, well, why would you release a bond bill with 1 month to go? And then we found out it was in the budget, so we said, well, how come we weren't notified? And we haven't gotten a satisfactory answer.
Just one of those things.
Yeah. So,
Update on the 2016 NPDES MS4 general permit and a request for proposals for FY20 stormwater engineering services. So I received notification today from the Environmental Protection Agency that the notice of intent for coverage under the small MS4 general permit that we filed this year was reviewed, and our 2016 NPDES MS4 general permit is approved through June 30th, 2022. This grants the town the authorization to discharge stormwater from our small, separate storm sewer systems in accordance with the applicable terms and conditions of the MS4 general permit. I have put together a request for proposals for MS4 engineering services to comply with year 2 and possibly year 3 and 4 of the permit requirements. The proposals are due by June 13th, and the Stormwater Task Force, the Land Use Director, and myself will evaluate the proposals thereafter. Meetings I will be attending. I have a dispatch negotiation session tomorrow at 1 p.m. in Devens. I will be attending the Green Communities meeting tomorrow evening at 6:30 p.m. in the library. I'll be at a small town administrators meeting in Princeton this Thursday, and there'll be a staff training on Tuesday, June 11th at 9 a.m. at the library, put on by the Alzheimer's Association as part of our path to becoming dementia friendly.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions for the town manager?
Oh, thank you, especially with the intersection. Thank you.
Okay, minutes.
There's some signatures for some thank you letters I see. And
Would be action files, but okay.
Now, are all these minutes coming through from all these years past?
Well,
that's the executive session.
That's a separate
Okay.
item we'll get to, yeah. I'm going to send down some thank you letters for people for their service who are stepping down or not being
I
reappointed.
only see executive session
Okay,
minutes.
so that's warrants. Let's leave those because those are the ones on the next one. Okay, accounts payable deduction warrant for $257,799.99. Accounts payable in the amount of $320,065.24. And payroll in the amount of $837,110.10.
Those are the executive session.
And we have the, action file issues first while this is going down.
Oh, sure. As we sign these thank you letters, I would like to see if we could put into place some sort of formal acknowledgement for when we lose, through death, somebody on an elected or appointed board. I know that throughout the passing of time, we ended up formally acknowledging Lance through the help of the senator and whatnot, but we don't seem to have anything where we acknowledge family and whatnot. Just like I'm reading these thank you notes, they're nice to send out, but for like Paul Doherty, I mentioned him at the end of last meeting, now to send to the family, thank you for the service of your father, husband, etc., wife, whomever it may be. I think it would feel good if we had a town acknowledgement of not just thank you for your service, but thank you to the family of somebody who's served and we've
That's a good
lost,
idea.
because we've just had our second one in a short time. And I feel like we can mention it and whatnot, but I feel like it deserves sort of a formal acknowledgement that we throw around. We have a vacancy on the ZBA. Yes, we had a death. And I feel like I want to honor the importance of losing somebody, not just through stepping down, but through a
I'm not
true
against
loss.
it.
So I don't know, Heather, if maybe we can come up with something when we lose somebody, we seek a way to acknowledge them to the family. Thank you.
Any other action file issues? Okay, approval and release of executive session minutes from October 1st, 2013 about the Lane property, December 8th, 2015, the collective bargaining, retiree insurance regulations, and DPW collective bargaining update, May 10th, 2016, Session 1, review of the IBPO Local 453 AFL-CIO and PEC negotiations, August 11th, August 24th, August 25th, August 30th of 2016, the interim town manager screening subcommittee, and November 22nd, 2016, the town manager contract.
There's a bunch
So-
of things on the other side, too.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize I was just getting started. October 10th, 2017, town manager contract, professional firefighters, DFFM, Local 4358A and AFSCME, Council 93, municipal employees, union negotiations. November 21st, 2017, Professional Firefighters, PFFM Local 4358A negotiations. March 20th, 2018, Session 1, PEC negotiations. March 20th, 2018, Session 2, DPW collective bargaining. April 10th, 2018, PEC negotiations. May 22nd, 2018, regarding 161 Gilchrist Street, Assessors Map 31, Parcel 10, and 171 Gilchrist Street, Assessors Map 31, Parcel 11. June 18th, Session, I'm assuming that's going to be 2018, Session 3, Cronin versus Town of Lunenburg ZBA Appeals Court Docket Number 2017-P-0099, and July 24th, 2018, DPW Union Collective Bargaining. So do we need a motion to approve these?
Yes.
So I would entertain a motion that we approve and release these executive session minutes.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Is this a roll call?
No.
No. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Can we just initial them all?
Well, you don't initial them all if you weren't there. So they go back a ways, so even I get to initial some because there were some when I was here. So look at them and decide whether you can initial them or not.
Okay.
All right, once we get...
Do you want to do committee reports while we're signing?
Sure.
Okay. The Stormwater Task Force met on Thursday, May 23rd. The Stormwater Management Plan was reviewed, a few changes suggested, and hopefully it will be ready to vote to approve at the June 13th meeting. Paula Bertram presented a slideshow on stormwater issues experienced at Hickory Hills. The chair of the Ashland Stormwater Advisory Committee, Rob St. Germain, Ashland is planning to attend the June 13th Stormwater Task Force meeting. It should be informative. Anyone else?
Anybody else have? Just grab control of the meeting, don't worry.
While you're busy signing.
Any other committee reports? All I can say is that the FinCom Committee Appointment Committee, try not to say that too fast at 10:20 at night, but we will be meeting because they have one reappointment, one person up for reappointment for their position. So we'll be meeting, I think, next week. Okay, so just look at the ones you have here.
Okay.
Department reports.
None.
Old business, we have.
It's going to be tabled.
Okay, so the amendment to Casella contract is being tabled to further date.
Mr. Chair, what about the, are you tabling as well the review of the town manager performance evaluation form and process? Item number 3.
That was accidental. I overlooked it. I apologize.
I think we can probably do it a different night, if that's okay.
I'm okay with that if you're okay with that.
Is that okay with everybody?
I will say that we want to do it sooner than later, and I think we owe it. I mean, my goal, and please weigh in, I mean, our goal, if the town manager is amenable, is to have this done and in place by the end of the summer. So by September
Yes.
30th, we should have a new one in place,
Correct.
or any modifications. Are you okay with that?
I hope to be sooner than that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we hope to
Yeah,
be
me
sooner.
too.
Because the longer it lays, the shorter the
Later.
time frame I have to work on my
Later than
goals,
today.
Well, we're going to do the
Sooner than
goals.
then.
The goals are going to be, I'm just talking about the review process.
We're to set up a more streamlined and efficient
Right.
review for next year, but not
Right.
procrastinate until it's too late.
Right, the goals I want to set next week. Next week, we have the goals thing. I want to try to get them done.
But the criteria too is what I'm being
Sure.
evaluated on. I would like to know that
Okay.
sooner than later.
We will shoot to have it sooner than that. Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Jeffries. I apologize for stepping over that. All right, next upcoming meetings. We have next week, June 11th, is the setting, we're going to have a workshop for setting the select board and the town manager goals for fiscal 2020. June 18th, we will have our regular meeting, and then we will talk about, on the June 18th, let's put it on an agenda item about the July and August schedule is going to be. I always think there's enough stuff to be done, but if everybody submits when their vacations are going to be, it may be apparent that some weeks we're not going to be able to have a meeting.
I know of one date I'm going to miss, so just submit that.
Yeah, send it to us so we know. I mean, I'll put in mine. I know I'm going to be out in 1 week in July. end
So
of
just
July.
summer, really? June,
Yeah.
July, August?
Well, that's when generally people take vacation. Otherwise, they take it all over the place. So
Okay.
it seems to be concentrated in the summer. Any public comment from the public?
I'm sorry, I do have one quick thing to say.
Sure.
Richard Bursch, 308 Electric Ave. I was listening quickly to your reappointment process discussion, and Tom, you did say it, but you should be having people that fill out the talent bank forms go to the committees or the commissions that they're interested in. You know, and Katie said it, you know, we meet every other Saturday plus every other Wednesday. Somebody signing up may not know the commitments that they're getting into and may show up to the first couple of meetings and not be prepared for the responsibility they've signed up for.
Yep.
So it's really important, I think, when you get a talent bank form, you try to encourage them to go and participate. I know when we get talent bank forms from Elaine, the first thing I have Matt do is invite them to one of our meetings and see what's going on and allow them to participate. The last person that we've had, the new appointee, was a member of the Hudson Conservation Commission, so she had an idea what she was doing. But it's really important to have them, you know, try to get into the fold a little bit before they make a 3 or 4 or 5 year commitment. So that was the only thing I would have to add to that process. So.
That was a nice Saturday morning you committed
Oh, it was
to
a beautiful
looking at
Saturday
trees.
morning, too. Thank you very much.
Any final public comment from the board? Okay. So we are going to go into executive session, not to return to open session, and I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session to adjourn after exiting executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section 21, Paragraph 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the government's litigating position and the chair so declares, namely, Aldris et al. Versus Board of Selectmen of the Town of Lunenburg et al., docket number 1985 CB 00647. Town of Lunenburg versus Edward Oliva Jr., docket number 16H85 CB 00812. National Prescription Opiate Litigation Case number 1:17-MD-2004. O'Brien Homes, Inc. et al. Versus Town of Lunenburg et al. Land Court docket numbers 13 MISC 477878 through 13 MISC 477887. Lake Shirley, and approval of executive session minutes related to these cases.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Roll call vote. All those in favor, Mr. Jeffries.
Aye.
Mrs. Adams.
Aye.
Mr. McQuaid.
Aye.
Mrs. Luck.
Aye.
And I for myself. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at our workshop next Tuesday. Good night.